Between the two of them, the inside of Coates, Parker gets too heavily involved, and that's Whitehead and Coates.
Last time racing for a while, Andy, you're not wrong. Round 3 is all the way, and April 10th is over the horizon. We've got an entirely new championship to be coming in just before that. Before we head to Le Mans, Sao Paulo in July, COTA as well in July, and then we take another little bit of a break until we hit in September. We go to Fuji, and October, Bahrain for the final round. And of course, there's 4 fantastic cars that the drivers can be picking from. We got the Mercedes, the Lamborghini, and the BMW are the 3 cars that really taken up the favour of drivers. But the Lexus is still there and waiting for any new drivers to come into the championship and fancy something slightly different. All the drivers will be racing for the first, second, and third trophies, and of course the driver of the round. 90-minute races, all broadcasted. It's a fantastic deal, Andy, and I'm sure, as you said, we've all been eyeing that endurance fix for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. And round 1 last time out at Qatar delivered everything that we hoped it would. Actually, a really big grid, one of the biggest grids of drivers we've had for quite some time. Really competitive racing, particularly inside the first half hour or so, but it was that strategy that kept everybody wondering what is the right thing to do, and I'm not really convinced that the drivers will have found an answer properly in time for tonight. But there was one driver who found the right answer to the strategy question a week ago, and it was Jack Smith in the DK Power Racing BMW. But it was a really interesting race because he was not by any means the fastest driver. He was probably about the 5th fastest driver in reality, but he played the strategy game perfectly. He went for a one-stop strategy, pitted pretty much bang on half-race distance, and that was it. He stayed out to the end. He didn't really lead the race very much until the final half an hour or so. It looked, for all the world, as though Ben Smith was going to claim a victory, but he went for a two-stopper, then picked up a penalty as well for track limits a little bit later on, and that meant that he was relegated to second. But even with an extra pit stop and with a penalty, he was only 13 seconds off the race victory, so read into that what you will. And then in third place, Andy Carroll, a fantastic performance. The top Lamborghini was very competitive, as he often is in these longer races, and so he finished on the podium. We had one of each of the cars represented, BMW, Mercedes and Lamborghini, on the podium in the opening round, Jack. Pretty much as we could have hoped for.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty perfect round, I think, from Richard's perspective. Apart from there was a slight glitch that we will mention because we were talking about it so much, Andy, last week. We'll just clean it up. It said Ben Smith was a lap down, and we were very confused about it for the entire time, weren't we? But, of course, apparently it was just a bit of a glitch on the timing and on the track. So it was Ben Smith who came in second place, mainly, as I think it was 13 seconds was the difference, Andy. I think you were just reading out. Yeah, so
13
Ben Smith.
seconds.
There we go. With the 13 seconds, that's pretty much the that penalty that he incurred, obviously, a little late into the race. But it's a bit of a shame for Ben. Hopefully we'll be talking to him later in the season. But, of course, there's the driver of the round, Andy Carroll. We were mentioning, oh my days, my head has gone absolutely blank. One of the, Eric Axelson, there we go, quite a lot because of how leery his Lamborghini was, whereas Andy Carroll seemed to be having the opposite sort of effect on his car. Very controlled, very calm and collected, and to be honest, drove it to perfection, didn't he? He chose the right strategy and ended up getting on the podium.
Indeed he did, and yeah, because of that, Driver of the Round award went his way, and that was really well deserved, actually, for Andy Carroll. He does excel at this kind of racing, but he really did exceed himself a week ago. So he was third place in that race, Ben Smith second, as we said, after that little glitch was sorted out. All of the results were manually calculated after the race, so any laps that were lost that shouldn't have been, they were erased from history, so we have a correct result. None of it changed Jack Smith the victor, but it will be interesting to see if that car or that driver doesn't have the pace tonight, whether or not he's going to be able to play the strategy game again. Well, the circuit, Jack, that we're racing at tonight, it is, as I said, one of the all-time greats. It's changed a little bit over the years, but at heart, it is still that fearsome track that drivers have been tackling for many a decade.
It's stunning, and since it's come back on a Formula 1 calendar, it's been one of the favourites as well, as if we'd never been away. So fingers crossed tonight they're sensible going into the first couple of corners, but the rest of the track is pretty full on, plenty of overtaking opportunities, and we can see it all in action as Andy talks us around the lap.
Well, the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari, bit of a mouthful, but well worth the effort because this is a circuit revered, feared, in fact, by some drivers, and you're about to see why. We barrel down this super long pit straight into a really tricky braking zone into the first chicane at Tamburello. Left, right, careful of the curbs. Some cars ride the curbs better than others, and that could be a factor as we move into the 90 minutes of racing. Then a short shoot down towards the second chicane. This is the Variante Villeneuve. Through the quick left, a slightly tighter right, but you can really fire the car over that apex curb and then get over to the right-hand side for a slightly uphill braking zone into the Tosa hairpin. It's uphill right the way through the corner, and that means you can carry good speed into the turn with gravity on your side to help slow you down. We keep on climbing then up towards Piratella, a virtually blind double apex left-hander, firing into the first apex, careful of track limits on the exit, and then flat out through the second part down into Aqua Minerale. A lot happens in quick succession here. Through the first right, onto the brakes, down a gear, over the curb through the next right, and then flat out through the left-hand kink, climbing back uphill again towards the Variante Alta. Another really deceptively tricky chicane. Right, left this time, and the left is tighter than the right, but it's very easy to hit that curb too hard and drift out wide, out of bounds. Then we accelerate downhill for once towards the final couple of corners, Ravazza's 1 and 2, but even these aren't simple. It's such a steep downhill braking zone out of a right-hand kink as well. Very easy to lose the nose of the car and drift out wide. The second Ravazza is crucial. You've got to get out of that corner well, because you're not going to lift that right foot off the loud pedal for quite a long time. There are a couple of kinks along this front stretch, but they're all easily flat out as you accelerate towards the timing line and another roller coaster lap around Imola. Well, Imola, what a place, Jack. It's one of those tracks that, although it has been sanitised for fairly obvious reasons over the years, it hasn't lost its character. It hasn't lost that sort of natural flow and rhythm that you get. It's one of those tracks that makes you want to keep on logging laps, and that's just as well, because we've plenty of laps to be logged tonight. I cannot recommend the unmute button enough, Jack.
Yeah, I was blowing my nose. I don't think you really want to hear that through it, so I do apologise, ladies and gentlemen, if I do go mute every so often. Yeah, I think there are a few drivers that have done well over 100 laps, following on from what you were just saying there, Andy. John Jones done 104 all the way up to Josh Martin, who's done 173. Whether or not that's because he enjoys the lap so much, or whether or not it's because he's struggling to find the pace, we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But Chris Blakey, who performed quite well in qualifying last week, getting inside the top 10 with 157 laps on board. And our race winner, Jack Smith, not taking anything for granted. 156 laps done in practice. And that wasn't quite getting up to qualifying. They may well have done a little bit more after we took those statistics. Currently, Jack Smith is on the top of the timing, but only by 0.5 of a second to Eric Axelson, the driver that I can't believe I forgot his name earlier on. But there he is, and the Lamborghini well at home in Italy.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be fitting, wouldn't it, to see a Lamborghini on top of the podium come the end of the race. We should mention, Jack is not feeling his best tonight, so I will do my best to go easy on you if you are struggling as the night goes on.
5 minutes in and you failed already.
Well, the good news is you don't have to talk for too long. Oh, no, never mind. We'll be there to support you as we go through the night, Jack, and very grateful to have you on board, even if you're a little bit under the weather. But Eric Axelson, clearly not. He is flying out there. Now, there's been a lot of talk, Jack, before tonight about this circuit perhaps favouring some cars more than others. There is a balanced performance that's been implemented across all three of the cars that were represented on the grid, but naturally, certain tracks, certain configurations, certain styles of corner will suit certain cars more than others. And a lot of talk here at Imola has been about which cars ride the curbs best. Now, the BMW seems to excel. The Lamborghini supposedly really struggles, but I think of Imola, and I do think of it as being a circuit that suits the mid-engine cars. Those change of direction, the acceleration out of the tight corners, that's Lamborghini territory, really.
Yeah, and I think if you look inside the top four, Joel Lask, Oliver Gibson, Eric Axelson, Jack Smith, there's all three cars represented in that top four. It's only Oliver Gibson and Jack Smith. Oliver Gibson, by the way, just going on pole, beating his brother Jack Smith to the top step currently, but Eric Axelson just put in a purple sector 2, but he says it's in the pits, so that's not going to be ideal for him. Well, we just seen him go in the pits, actually, didn't we, of course? So the two BMWs are on top, but really, Andy, I think a lot of the controversy comes because, obviously, the BMW won last week. The BMW won last week because of the correct strategy call. So it definitely wasn't the fastest car. You even said, I think it was about the 5th or 6th fastest. The Merc was the best. We've come to Imola, and it just so happens that the BMW is on top. So a lot of people, I think, maybe slightly salty because of that strategy call that went Jack Smith's way. But now is his chance to actually show on the road he may well be the quickest.
It just so happens, a race that Jack probably didn't have the pace to win, he found the strategy. It's almost like he's quite good at this, isn't it? And he just knows how to find the top step of the podium. Now, Joel Lask has found the top step of the podium a few times in the past, and he is flying. He's just gone fastest of anybody in Sector 1. So as Jack Smith came across the line there to not improve and stay in second place, we need to turn our attention to this man, Joel Lask, who is starting to find a bit of pace out there. He's heading up towards the Variante Alta. He is in one of the Mercedes-AMG GT3s that looked so strong a week ago. He's dangerously close to exceeding track limits out of the Variante Alta, but he's gone purple in Sector 1, Jack, green in Sector 2, an improvement surely incoming.
Yeah, I don't know if that was track limits. If it's not, then I don't think it's going to be an improvement out of that corner, that's for sure, because I think he had to come off the throttle to stop the rear end squiveling around the place. But if he can nail this even anywhere close to what he's done previously, then those first and second sectors should take him to the front row of the grid. And as the rest of them start to file into the pits just ahead to get some new tyres, Joel Last will come across the line. It's not an improvement to the front row, but it is an improvement by one position. He's up to third.
Joel is known for slipping into some pretty tight spaces out on track. He's just done the same thing on the timing screen, because I did not think we'd get a car between Jack Smith and Eric Axelsen as close as their times were. But Joel Lask has just managed to do that, so he goes third. We've got three of them separated by less than half a tenth there, second, third, and fourth. And again, that is a BMW, a Mercedes, and a Lamborghini, all running at almost an identical lap time. So there's not a huge amount to choose between them. It's just that Oliver Gibson has found a huge chunk of time. Worth remembering, though, that Oliver had a disappointing opening round of the championship, and so he arrives here with only 15 kilos of success ballast on board, because he's, well, didn't score a point, actually, didn't finish that race at Qatar a week ago. So that perhaps explains why he's going so quickly here. This is not, Jack, an ideal place to be carrying weight because of all of those acceleration zones and all of the elevation change.
We were questioning Oliver Gibson's choice to quit, actually, weren't we? Although he had a little bit, he said it was damage, but he could have come in, got the damage sorted, and got back out. And okay, he may well have come in the bottom 2 or 3, but he would have still scored points. Because we said, well, if he still scores the points and then he goes and wins the next 3 rounds, he's in a championship battle, but he quit. That means he didn't get the points at all, and all of a sudden it looks like he could be well on his way to a race victory here with current qualifying, holding true. It's going to be very tough, because of course I'm looking for Nicky Taylor, 5th place on the track on the grid at the moment, but he got pole last time and it really didn't go his way, did it?
No, it didn't. Pole position means very little in long-distance racing. Nicky had the pace in the early stages, seemed to burn through the tyres, and then was on the wrong strategy as well. Now, Eric Axelsen, personal best Sector 1. Jack Smith has just improved in Sector 1 as well, so we'll keep an eye on him, but we'll get Axelsen across the line first. Just dips 2 wheels onto the grass, but seemed to get away with it as he turned into the second Ravazza, but then sweeps over to the middle of the road. That's strange. You can go easily flat out through that kink, so usually drivers hug the pit wall for the shortest route to the line. Is that going to cost Axelsen some time? Quite possibly, because there's no improvement in the end. That was a lap time of a 1:42.9, his previous best of 42.6, but Jack Smith has gone personal best in both of the first 2 sectors on this lap. 4.5 minutes left in the session. Is this Jack Smith's latest bid to try and get back to the pole position? It's already a DK Power Racing 1-2. It is still a DK Power Racing 1-2, and still in the same order, because it's only a small improvement in the end there for Jack Smith. Still 2/10 off his teammate.
I think he was 3/10 up going into the final corner, and only a 10th up when he crossed the line, so there was something wrong in that final corner. Here's Andy Carroll, the driver of the round and another podium sitter last week, not really having it all his own way. In 12th position, he will pick up a nice little toe. There he goes, jumping up into 9th place with 3 green sectors. Very nice. But Chris Blakey just set a green sector 1. He could be a bit of a thorn in the side of Andy Carroll. Ben Smith is a driver that we haven't really mentioned that much. And there is Chris Blakey, just as I started talking about him. Probably best focus on Ben Smith rather than Jack Smith for just 2 seconds, because he's currently down in 8th position, Andy. That's not where we expected to see him. Behind Josh Martin, Johnny Ogden, of course, who's a newcomer to the championship in 6th place. But yeah, Ben Smith, after being so good last week, currently in 8th.
Indeed he is. Qualified on the front row last week, did Ben Smith, so in for perhaps a different kind of race tonight. Worth pointing out, though, Andy Carroll, who ended up on the podium a week ago, guess where he started? 9th on the grid, and he's just gone 9th fastest again. So as we've seen, qualifying only tells half the story, and there's still a good chance for Andy to get back up into podium contention. Same true of Ben Smith. Now, Eric Axelsen, second, we're following Josh Martin. I got mixed up between the green Lamborghinis. I knew that would happen at some point. Eric Axelsen improves back onto the front row, splits the BMWs. What could his teammate Josh Martin do? Well, he'd improved in Sector 1. Sector 2, though, has got away from him, and I think less chance of an improvement now, but Axelsen back on the front row.
Yeah, that's good. Josh Martin actually was put in Sector 2 that wasn't allowed. He went off for track limit, so whatever he was doing in the Sector 3, actually, in the end, probably wouldn't have mattered too much, but it would have been nice to see what kind of representative time, but he's actually 10 seconds off his lap now, which is a bit of a shame for him. But yeah, you're right, Eric Axelsen showing that it's not just a BMW powerhouse, this Imola circuit. The Lamborghini does have a shot. The BMW does have a shot as well. It's not like Joel Lask is that far away. Only nearly 3/10. It sounds like a lot, Andy, but when you consider the difference between 4th and 2nd, you just have to admit that maybe Oliver Gibson's just got it in him this afternoon.
Yeah, Gibson flying. He's light as well as far as ballast is concerned, so this is a good opportunity for him to rebound. Bear in mind, we do have a dropped score as well to take into account, so okay, he's had one non-finish, but he's got a chance still to be a title contender. Ben Smith, by the way, just improved into the top 5, and he's going quicker again on the first sector of his latest lap. Eric Axelsen, we're following down towards the Ravatsas, and he's not improving on this lap, so unless he can pull out something really magical in Sector 3, he's likely to stay second. But what can Ben Smith do? Personal best Sector 1, he's heading down into Aqua Minerale now. This is the section of the track where maybe the front-engine cars might struggle. He bounces over the curb. That really rotated the car, Jack.
It did, yeah, which might work to his advantage sometimes. And I don't know whether it was a little bit of a mistake or whether it was fully intentional, but sometimes when you make that small little bit of a mistake, it can actually work out really well. And he's absolutely nailed that curb. And the Mercedes looks like it may well be on for a very strong finish here. Coming down towards the penultimate corner. Can he be nice and late on the brakes? You have to be super, super careful. You can't be too greedy. There's a little bit of snap of oversteer, and he's on the grass, Andy. I think that's going to hurt him.
Yeah, a bit too late on the brakes. That's where the front-engine cars struggle, because gravity is working against you downhill, under braking, and all of that weight over the front of the car. You just can't get the thing turned in sometimes, and that, unfortunately, is going to hinder Ben Smith. He needed 4/10 anyway to improve. Well, in fact, less than that now, because Nicky Taylor has just jumped ahead of him into the top 5. Yeah, that, in the end, is going to leave Ben Smith in 6th place. Time for one more lap if he's got the tyres underneath him. Eric Axelsen has time for another lap as well, and he is improving on that final lap of the session. Personal best in Sector 1. Nicky Taylor with a PB in Sector 1 as well, so quite a few improvements perhaps coming in late. Chris Blakey in the top 10, by the way, has just gone personal best in the first sector. Case Williams as well, so lots of drivers peaking at the end of the session. Axelsen not able to improve in Sector 2, but he's still on course here, Jack, I think, for a really good lap.
Yeah, I wonder what everybody else's slipstream situation is, because of course Eric seems to be in no man's land, not being able to follow anybody, whereas I know Joel Lask is behind someone. He might be towing along a few other people. No, they're coming into the pits, but Eric looks like he's had a half-decent last couple of corners. It's a straight run to the line now for him to potentially take that pole position off of Oliver Gibson. It's not been the perfect Sector 2, like Andy's just said, but it is a pretty good Sector 3. Good enough to snatch pole position away from the BMWs of Oliver Gibson and Jack Smith. Oliver Gibson, I don't think is quite finished. He's still on a lap, or is that his BMW coming into the pits?
Oh, well, yes, it was, but he'd done a personal best in Sector 2. That's a shame. Nicky Taylor, though, 2 personal bests. What can he do? He was in 5th position. He comes across the line and goes 3rd. Nicky Taylor, out of nowhere. Welcome to the party, Nicky. He was the king of qualifying a week ago. We won't be chatting to him after this session as the pole sitter, but that was a demon late effort. And Nicky Taylor will be starting from the inside of row number 2. Who else is improving? No one really. I think most people have now bailed for the pit lane or have completed their lap. Paul Laramie we're following here. And Paul, who was runner-up in the Cayman class of our Porsche Championship a little while ago, has improved in Sector 1. So Laramie, if he can find a couple of tenths here, could jump up a position or so. But what a fabulous qualifying session was that was. Look at Johnny Ogden as well. Johnny Ogden into 6th position. Now, Johnny, let me remind myself where he finished a week ago. He was 8th, wasn't he? He was in that lead pack at the start of the race. So 6th place, he's going to be a factor again, I think, tonight. And of course, Johnny with no ballast on his car. Well, we have set ourselves up for an intriguing 90 minutes of racing. That's coming up on the other side of this quick break. Do not go anywhere. Well, welcome back, everybody. We're all just about catching our breath after what was a very exciting qualifying session that went right down to the dying minutes. And a late improvement from Eric Axelsen saw him leapfrog Oliver Gibson, who was the pace setter for much of the session, to claim pole position. And Eric joins us now in the commentary box. Eric, congratulations. A phenomenal late effort, actually, to find a fairly big chunk of time. Did you feel that that time was still there for the taking, or was that a bit of a surprise?
Well, to be honest, I felt I felt that I had the pace throughout the practice. I've done some practice the last couple 2 days, and I felt I had the pace. I just couldn't. It's a lot of traffic, and it's quite a short track and a lot of cars. And also, I was starting to have these like small frame drops. But then I figured it out and managed to put a time in, so that was good.
Very good indeed. It gets you pole position, which is useful to have, albeit not the be all and end all, really, in endurance racing, as we saw Nicky Taylor started on pole a week ago and unfortunately wasn't able to stay there. But what do you think your chances are of being able to stay at the front and sort of manage the race? Your car looked very difficult to manage a week ago. So have you been working on a slightly more drivable setup for this week?
Yeah, you bet. Last week was terrible, so yeah, a new setup for this week, and hopefully it will be a bit more stable, like further in the race stints, and just hope to. It's especially at Imola. It's nice to start at the front because those chicane can get a bit interesting sometimes. But yeah.
That's one word for it, certainly. Let's talk about those chicanes, Eric. There's been a lot of talk in the week about which cars are handling the curbs the best, and some people think that maybe the front-engined cars are a bit more stable over the curbs. But how are you finding the Lamborghini? Do you feel that you can be as aggressive as you need to be?
When we started on the setup, it was we took the setup from last week, and it wasn't able to take the curbs at all. It was terrible. And then we started to tweak it, me and Josh. And Josh spent quite a lot of time actually. Yeah, we found a setup that seems to work okay over the curbs and still managed to keep speed throughout the whole lap. But I mean, it's still quite sketchy, but it's okay.
Well, hopefully not too sketchy for you to hang on to it for 90 minutes. Eric, congratulations. Well done on the pole position. Best of luck for the race.
Thank you, Andy.
So Eric Axelsen then back where he feels he belongs on pole position, and he is going to be very, very much looking forward to getting this race underway. We're about 6 minutes away from getting racing underway tonight, Jack. And at the end of the 90 minutes, our attention will turn very much back to sprint racing.
Yeah, well, we said that the calendar takes a bit of a hiatus while we enforce a new championship in the sort of weeks in between. And of course, that is the Mini JCW Cup. Donington Park, Mondello, Castle Coombe, Walton Park, Croft, Anglesey, Thuxton, and Brandt Hatch GP. Not only are they some of the best circuits in England, or Britain, I should say, actually, Andy, it's also a number of circuits that have quite similar characteristics. They're tight, they're twisty. If anything, Thuxton and Donington are the sort of biggest and widest of those tracks, which is saying something. A first place prize, if you do win the minis, is a camera simulation direct drive wheel. Second place is that sort of onboard heads-up display. It's a fantastic little bit of kit. Thanks very much to Phoenix Sim Racing. Third place, you get the Mecha handbrake or shifter as well. And it's you also get the first, second, and third trophies, along with the fourth and fifth place having some VRRC kits made up to your specification. And of course, the drive of the round all the way through as well. A pretty good prize ball, Andy.
It is indeed, absolutely, and I'm sure that will bring lots of drivers in, lots of familiar faces, hopefully a few new names as well, who perhaps have drifted in because of the endurance racing, might fancy a go at the mini championship, a championship that, as you said, takes in, well, 3 of the 4 countries within the United Kingdom. We are just missing a trip to Knockhill. I'll whisper it before Rich tells me off, but, that would be nice. Anyway, not visiting Knockhill is our Formula One Mirror League. This is a new initiative for 2024. This is a single-seater championship using, I believe it's the Formula 3 GT3 car along, taking in 12 rounds across the year, starting on March the 7th and running to December the 5th. It is essentially mirroring 12 of the Formula One races throughout the season, running from Saudi Arabia right the way through to Abu Dhabi. There are trophies at the end of the championship. It is a fairly familiar format, 2 25-minute races, the second of those with a full reversed grid. Free entry to any member of the VRRC. For non-members, it is £10 per round, and you've got one drop round out of those 12 if you have to miss a week, Jack.
Yeah, it looks like a good calendar as well. 11 of the best circuits and Miami, so that's quite exciting. Time attacks, and we're carrying on with the GT theme. I think you mentioned last week, Andy. Well, I'm going to copy you because, of course, there's the Alpine GT4 around Monaco. Again, questionable choice of circuit. Aston Martin GT. I'm only joking, Rich. Aston Martin GT3 is a couple of weeks after around Las Vegas. Circuit to Spa, Francorchamps is BMW M2 GT2, and then the Porsche 911 GT1 progressively getting faster, progressively getting harder, and the circuit's progressively getting more prestigious as well. Finishing off at Le Mans in that Porsche 911 GT1 is brilliant, I'm sure. And we want to get on with that. That is starting on the 19th of February as well. What date are we on? Currently on round 2, the Aston Martin GT3 around Las Vegas. Free entry to all VRRC members, and there's prizes for each time attack and the overall league as well over the 4 rounds.
Indeed so. So get yourself signed up, free entry as we've said, and you could be earning yourself some prizes if you set the fastest time. Right then, it is almost time to get into our second round of the World Endurance League here from Imola. The cars are gridding up, and we are almost ready to go racing with Eric Axelsen and Oliver Gibson sharing that front row of the grid. Jack, we've got about a minute and a half or so, I think, before this race gets underway. Predictions, quite a few things to try and wrap our heads around here. Who do you think is going to be the fastest? Do you think that the fastest driver will win? And what do you think the winning strategy will be this week?
You got me. I was going to try and hope to answer your first question by being on the fence and cryptic, saying, well, it could be this person, but I don't think they'll win, and then not have to specify. I would be surprised if we don't have a BMW Victor. Mainly because I think Jack Smith is so good on his tyres. He obviously got the strategy right last week. People have caught on to the strategy. People have also done a lot more laps around the circuit now in preparation. Eric Axelsen, he did 1 flying lap. Let's see if he can repeat that. But again, we have said before, Andy, and last week, that you don't need to do 100% all the time. Endurance racing is about who can do 95% of their best lap time 20 out of 20 laps, isn't it? So it's going to be interesting to see whether the Lamborghini can hold on to its tyres, how much fuel they're putting in as well, because that dictates how much time they spend in the pits. There's so much to think about here. It's going to be really interesting. But to answer your question, I think we're going to have Jack Smith as a victor for the second week running. I wouldn't be surprised if Nicky Taylor is in the lead, though, by the end of the first lap. That's my controversial opinion.
Okay. Well, he was pretty rapid from the front of the grid for a short amount of time after admittedly limited practice last week. Hopefully he's got some more laps in this week and he's managed the tyre wear out a little bit better. Do you need 1 stop? Do you need 2 stops? Do you short fuel? Do you put a full tank in at the start? So many questions, and this is why we love this form of racing. So Lamborghini and BMW row 1, Eric Axelsen versus Oliver Gibson. Gibson's car, remember, by far the lightest of those at the pointy end of the grid. Oliver Gibson carrying, what did I say it was? I think 15 or 25 kilos. It was 15 kilos of ballast for this second round of the championship. Axelsen with 30, and of course Jack Smith on that second row of the grid with 50 kilos. Nicky Taylor's carrying 30 as well, so a big advantage there for Gibson, and it's a long run down towards that first chicane at Tambirello as well, so that could benefit the slightly lighter BMW. It's got the inside run into that first turn as well, so an Oliver Gibson lead into turn 1 is not really something to be betted against. But this is going to be a fantastic 90 minutes. Strap yourselves in, everyone. Make yourself comfortable and get ready to enjoy the second round of the VRRC World Endurance League here from Imola. Eric Axelsen and Oliver Gibson sharing the front row, staring at the lighting gantry, which is illuminated red. The lights go out and Axelsen bolts a brilliant getaway. Look at Nicky Taylor, though. Nicky Taylor with the best start of the lot of them. Jack's prediction may well come true because Nicky Taylor's making it 3 wide for the race lead down towards Tambirello. on the outside line, the Mercedes, 3 wide they go. Gibson gets his nose ahead. Axelson bails out of that situation sensibly, and so he drops to third behind Nicky Taylor. It's Gibson, Taylor, Axelson, and then Joel Lask in fourth. Jack Smith, the round one winner, is fifth, ahead of Ben Smith in sixth position. A clean run. No, one car spinning around at the back of the field. That is Stuart Vickers, unfortunately, but he appears, Jack, to be the only turn one casualty.
Yeah, I thought we might have another one, to be honest, between Josh Martin and Johnny Ogden, because they were going very aggressive down towards turn 4 and 5. But as they come back up the hill, it looks like it's a good start from Oliver Gibson. No real dramas for him. He got that inside out of 3 wide, and he managed to sort of brave it to the inside. No one else really fancied having a big crash at the beginning of a 90-minute race, which is very sensible from them all, and we thank them. Oh, big moment. Who was that?
That was Ben Smith, I think.
Is it Ben Smith?
I think so.
Ben Smith. Yeah, Joel Lask is up in 4th place, isn't he? So Ben Smith, his start going from bad to worse, and he's behind Josh Martin and just in front of his teammate, Johnny Ogden.
Well, that'll catch your attention. I've no idea how he managed that, but must have drifted onto the grass somehow coming through Piratella, and very, very well did Ben Smith do there to keep control of the car. He's got his teammate Ogden right behind, so the 2 yellow Mercedes running in tandem, but Nicky Taylor, star of the show so far, so nearly got the lead, and I think, honestly, if his car had been as light as Oliver Gibson's, he probably would have outdragged the BMW on the run into turn 1. That was a lightning quick getaway, and second place at the end of lap 1 is his reward. Gibson leads there by 0.8 of a second, Taylor second, Axelson third, Joel Lask sits in fourth ahead of Ben Smith and Jack Smith and Josh Martin, completing the top half dozen. Ben Smith seemingly in the background there under pressure from his teammate Johnny Ogden, who sits in behind him, and they all make their way through the Tamburello chicane for the second time. But really, Oliver Gibson now, Jack, just needs to try and streak away, doesn't he? Use that lack of ballast and the clean air to his advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets a decent enough gap, we could see the toe being broken as well. That is obviously what Oliver Gibson will be hoping for. I'm guessing him and Jack Smith will have worked quite heavily on their strategy as well. So will everybody else. So they might not be able to find anything that really turns up the work. But here goes Eric Axelson looking very interesting. Nicky Taylor, is that Nicky looking a little bit defensive potentially, just positioning his car so no one can squeeze around the outside of him? I think Axelson is very keen to try and get through. Taylor's car looks a little bit squirrely, if you ask me, on the rear end.
Yeah, this is a bit of a nightmare for Axelson because he knows he was quicker than Taylor in qualifying. He was quicker than Taylor by about 0.3 of a second, but Nicky getting that good start has bought himself some extra track position. But Axelson knows he's probably got the potential to go quicker. Oh, no, that's Andy Carroll. Andy Carroll around down at Aqua Minerale. Oh, and then gets a wheel in the gravel and nearly spins as he recovers. He will drop to the back of the field, and this now becomes a bit of a recovery drive for the podium finisher and driver of the round from a week ago. That's a shame. Whether he did that on his own, I'm not so sure, but he has dropped all the way down into 16th place. Bit of a nightmare start, but yeah, the Eric Axelson will be keen here to try and find a way past Nicky Taylor as soon as possible, because he will believe that he's got the pace to run after the race leaders. Through across the line we go at the end of lap 2. The battle I'm interested in is between Jack Smith and Joel Lask. Jack Smith had closed in on Joel quite considerably, had a big slipstream there down the pit straight as well, and there you can see the BMW hunkered up behind the AMG as they head through Tamburello for the 3rd time.
Yeah, well, I don't think Joel will really mind me saying, but he was obviously one of those drivers that was questioning the superiority of the BMW, but he finds himself ahead of one of them now. So it's I'm guessing those questions may well be raised again if Jack Smith manages to glide past him. But if we know anything about Joel Lask, no one just casually drives past him, do they? He puts up one hell of a fight. He's a very, very aggressively defensive driver when he wants to be, and Jack Smith will probably know that, and he probably won't push the boat out too far and wait for a mistake. The reason why I picked Nicky Taylor out to potentially be leading, Andy, or to do well, I did say leading to be fair, so I got that wrong slightly, but is because I just feel like everybody else goes into that first corner, Eric Axelson, Jack Smith, Oliver Gibson. Nobody wants to crash, and I don't think Nicky Taylor has that filter quite so highly strung as everybody else. I think he's a bit more of a racer at heart, an aggressive sprint racer at heart, and it felt like he was going to be very aggressive around the outside, and we almost saw it, didn't he? He didn't seem afraid to get his elbows out and really go for the gap, go for the move, and that reaction start that he had was pretty outrageous. If Oliver Gibson didn't have that lightweight car, we may well have seen a different race leader as the time stands. But as it is, it's Oliver Gibson who leads, and he's pulling away by about a tune of 0.2 of a second, so he's doing everything he needs to do.
He is indeed, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. Nicky Taylor with a brilliant start and then knew that he had to take advantage of it. Aggression can sometimes, I think, Jack, be seen as a bit of a dirty word, particularly in long-distance racing. There's nothing wrong with it. If you see a chance to attack, absolutely go for it, and that is what Jack Smith is doing in the background, round the outside of Joel Last. That is risky for the championship leader. Did it pay off? Is the BMW ahead? Look in the background. No. And where is the BMW? He's dropped right back. So Jack Smith, I think, has been for a trip at least across the curbs, maybe through the gravel, and that is the risk of going around the outside of Joel Last at turn one. A big slide there, though, from Nicky Taylor, and that was Axelson's chance. Eric looking up the inside, does more than look up the inside. He sails through into second place. A mistake from Nicky Taylor, and Eric Axelson pounced immediately.
Yeah, no, there was a big hit of the curb on the inside from Nicky Taylor, just as we were looking backwards to try and find a BMW. And Mercedes went squirreling, and the Lamborghini slotted up the inside. That's what Eric has been waiting for. What he can't afford to do now, though, is make a mistake. Here goes Nicky Taylor with that aggression that you were talking about before, Andy. You're right, it sounds like a dirty word, doesn't it? But it's not. If anything, it's still a good trait to have. Endurance racing is still racing. You still need to be able to make moves, and strategy doesn't count for everything. You still want to see on-track battles.
And let's be honest, and I know I'm going to get some heat for saying this, it's not really an endurance race. It's a 90-minute race. If this was a 24-hour, if this was a 24-hour race and we had an hour and a half to go, it would be no holds barred, because you know it's a sprint to the finish, really. So yeah, absolutely. If you see a chance to gain a position, or if you are under attack from another driver, as Nicky does not make friends with the apex there through Ravazza 2, then yeah, absolutely you should go for it. And I often feel conscious of this when we do discuss someone like Joel Last, and we always talk about how aggressive he is and gets his elbows out. That is a compliment. We love seeing drivers really getting stuck in and not making it easy for their rivals. Now, speaking of not making it easy, it looks as though we've got a very, very defensive Case Willems here in 9th position, excuse me. He's got a queue forming behind him. Josh Martin, though, is going to try and break out of this battle by getting to the inside line into Tamburello. The Lamborghini teammate to Eric Axelson goes through, and then Chris Blakey almost wipes out Case Willems there. Just about bailed out of that in the BMW. Now he's under attack from Craig Curtis.
Yeah, I think Craig Curtis saw a gap opening and then decided he was going for it, whether it fully opened or not. He didn't get through, but I thought it was one. I was about to praise Chris Blakey, actually, for really looking like he was going to send one at the inside, but anchoring on the brakes and making Case just miss the apex the second time out, or hit the curb a little bit too hard, going in too hot for that right-hand apex. In the end, I don't think it was quite as planned as I would have liked it to have been, and Chris Blakey ended up messing the corner exit up slightly as well. Here is Ben Smith following his teammate, Johnny Ogden. Ogden driving quite well, probably about as well as he was doing last week, maybe not quite as high up. But Ben Smith certainly dropping off from where he was last week, and for his perspective, it'll be a bit of a shame. Absolutely clatters the curb on the right-hand side, misses it on the left, which is the right way around, isn't it? But it doesn't seem to quite be in tune, especially as you look at Jack Smith pulling away from the two Mercedes.
Yeah, so these two have swapped since we last saw them. It was Smith ahead of Ogden. I have to wonder whether that was maybe a little bit of team cooperation, because it did look as though Ogden was perhaps a little bit quicker. What's happened to Nicky Taylor? That's Nicky Taylor. Yeah, well spotted, Jack. I've just seen that dropping down the timing screen. He's been off at Ravazza and has dropped now down into 5th place, excuse me, and a long way behind the leading group. And he's got no momentum down the pit straight. So the pair of all yellow Mercedes behind him are going to close in now, heading through the first chicane. So Nicky Taylor, what has gone on there then? Of course, he just lost that 2nd place to Eric Axelson. Did he try and retaliate and it all went wrong, or was he just pushing too hard, trying to keep up? We've seen a few moments from Nicky, haven't we, in this race already?
Yeah, no, he doesn't quite look at one with the car, does he? Maybe he said last week that he hadn't done any practice. I'm not sure if he's done any practice. This time, those statistics didn't seem to include him on there. The lowest amount of laps completed were by Stuart Vickers, 0. Kenny Press was 7, Case Willems was 7. So, if anything, Case was doing quite well to be in the top 10 regardless. And then Mark Stokes, who's currently down in 21st, he did 9 laps in total. So, theory suggests that Nicky Taylor was somewhere in between, which is more than what he did last week, but it doesn't seem to be quite going as well as it did last week. His setups, I don't think, is anywhere near it. So he's struggling. He needs to he's probably desperate to try and get in and get those tyres off already, to be honest, because he's probably chewing more quickly through them than he would like, clattering curbs, squirreling the rear end. It doesn't seem to be going his way.
And this is the kind of thing that can very easily force your hand strategy-wise. If you're burning through the tyres really quickly, then a one-stop strategy just isn't in your playbook. You're going to have to go for the two-stopper, which Nicky did a week ago in Qatar, and unfortunately just did not have the long-run pace. And then if you start making mistakes too, then obviously that's going to make things even harder for you. It's a more unforgiving circuit as well, I think it's worth saying here at Imola. So if the car's not handling right, or if you are a little bit out of practice, it's going to show up more here than it would at a circuit like Qatar. Right then, 11 minutes of racing in. Is that enough action for you, Jack, in the first 11 minutes? It's felt at times more like a 20-minute sprint, this. And actually, I don't think that's going to change, because that gap... Oh no, there goes Nicky! There goes Nicky around through the second part of Tamburello. And yeah, you called it right there, Jack. He did not look happy with how that car was handling.
No, it's so squirrely on that rear end, and if you have to nail every single corner, as we see Josh Martin having a look at Kogashiwa. It's getting very aggressive. You don't have to convince me of the endurance racing, Andy. I'm already pretty sold on it, to be honest, and I think a lot of people at home will all of a sudden realise it's not that boring. It's not just a 20-minute race spread over 90. Think of it more like 3 half-hour races launched back to back to back, especially with pit stops and everything, new tyres coming on board. It is like people restart the race yet again. And Eric Axelsson chasing down Oliver Gibson. There was a time where this was over 1.2 seconds, nearly a second and a half. It's now about a second, isn't it? I was going to say just below, but that chicane they actually opened up slightly.
Yeah, and that is where the Beamer can use the curbs a little bit more, but I'm not seeing that Lamborghini struggling through many corners, honestly, to follow the same lines as the BMW. So I think that car is set up pretty well. It looks a different animal to the car that Eric had a week ago at Qatar. It looks planted, it looks stable, it looks like he can get it stuck into the apex and really drive it how he wants to drive it. And it's really benefiting him at the moment. The gap does creep up after that little moment through the chicane. Slightly slower that time for Eric Axelsson, but he certainly looks pretty pacey. So too, though, does the championship leader Jack Smith on the tail of Joel Lask, the BMW in the slipstream, looking to try and get alongside the Mercedes. He's already tried the outside line down here once, and that didn't end well. So no surprises there, Jack, to see that Jack Smith did not opt for the long way round that time.
No, I think he's trying to set up a move, isn't he? He's trying to force Joel Lask offline, go defensive, trying to use Joel Lask's defensive aggression against him, maybe, which can be really key at times, can't it? Play the driver, not the car a little bit. And Jack Smith is a wily old fox. He knows full well what to do, and he's won plenty of championships in the past, won plenty of races with us as well. And he knows how to set up a driver, and hopefully Joel Lask, is sort of aware of that, and he's sort of playing the game as well, because this looks like it could be a really good battle for the next, hopefully, hour and 16 minutes.
Indeed so. I mean, Jack Smith will be hoping it doesn't last for that long. He wants to try and get past Joel Lask, but it's not usually an easy thing to do. It's a very narrow circuit, this at Imola as well. These are big cars. It's not easy to find a gap that is going to stay open long enough for you to slip through it. But Jack weaving around, he's doing everything right. He's trying to fill the mirrors of Joel Lask, trying to force a mistake and trying to play to the advantages of the BMW. But both of these cars reasonably similar in design. They're both front engines, so they're both going to benefit, or both going to excel at similar parts of the circuit. The BMW supposedly performs a bit better in the speed traps, but, well, this will help Jack Smith's chances, because Joel Lask is all over the grass between the Ravazzas, dirt on his tyres, he's sideways onto the pit straight. This should really be a pretty easy move.
Yeah, well, Jack Smith went on the grass himself a little bit, but if anything, that helped him, because he just held him up just before they got to the apex. But you're right, I think the BMW is going to slide their way through. Joel Lask won't be very pleased about that one. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a reply fairly quickly. I was even half expecting one going into the second corner there, but it looks like Joel Lask will have to wait to fight another day. Here is Eric Axelsson. The gap has come down by another 0.4, Andy.
Yeah, this is Eric Axelsson on top form, isn't it? This is what we like to see. He managed to salvage a top 5 finish a week ago in a car that he said was horrible to drive. And here he is at Imola with a car set up properly. And he looks quick enough to challenge for the victory, doesn't he? We are nearly 15 minutes into the race, so we're quite a long way away from pit stops. Oh, never mind, Nicky Taylor's having a pit stop. But that, I suspect, is more to do with the spin that he had before. We've also got Stuart Vickers in the pits. He's been there for 6 laps, so I suspect his day may be done. But an early pit stop, a very early pit stop there for Nicky Taylor, and that is him out of contention. That's a real shame.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if he's retiring, potentially. But again, like we were talking about Oliver Gibson, We want them to finish the race. You score points if you finish the race, and we don't want anybody to retire just out of frustration. Nicky Taylor does seem to be moving again, I think, even though he is in the pits. So fingers crossed he comes back out. Yeah, there he goes. He's in 19th place. I don't know how flexible the setup is once you get into the pits, whether there's much you can do, Rich, in terms of mid-race strategy. Can you change the car in any way? Right, okay, so Rich was just saying he can repair damage and change tyre pressure, but in terms of setup, Andy, that's all they can do. So whatever is on Nicky Taylor's car when the lights went green is what he's going to have to put up with.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is not going to put him in a better mood, is it, unfortunately, because clearly things not really working as they should be, that car not handling as it should be. It's going to be a long evening ahead for Nicky Taylor, but as you said, he's at least back in the race, and, well, he's off cycle now with everybody else. He's on a truly unique strategy, and you never know, he might be able to still salvage a top 10. Eric Axelsen, though, not thinking about a top 10, he wants a race victory. He's hunting down Oliver Gibson, who is now starting to look a little bit wayward. Didn't make the apex there through Tosa, did the BMW driver. Axelsen neat and tidy. He's just got to try and outlast Gibson, I think, hasn't he? A mistake more likely, you'd say at this point, Jack, to come from the race leader than the man in second.
Yeah, and just a quick note on the other BMW as well, pulling away from Joel Lask quite substantially. So the BMW clearly has pace, but it's the man in third place that has all that pace rather than the person on pole position. So Oliver Gibson somewhat looking like he's having to fight the car to survive here. Axelsen throwing his car anywhere he wants, and it's absolutely planted. He's nailing every single apex, hitting every curve beautifully. He's driving it superbly, and it's somewhat the Eric Axelsen of old, wasn't it, Andy, that we're looking at here, because he used to be so precise, so smooth, so elegant with his driving and everything. And now he sort of went off the boil a little bit. Maybe he couldn't practice as much, but he seems to be absolutely nailing it here at Imola. Maybe it's just a case of a driver loving a particular circuit, or maybe he's sort of trying to get his mojo back and put those laps in. We'll have to ask him and see maybe later on. But at the moment, he's driving superbly, and he could end up getting the race lead before the end of the next lap.
Yeah, but you can just see there, can't you, the slight weakness of the Lamborghini is straight line speed. Even with a slipstream, he was further behind the BMW at the end of the straight than he was at the start, but there's the advantage he has. Mid-engine car, the change of direction, the speed through Tamburello, and he's looking to the inside into Villeneuve. They've just put a lap on one of the Mercedes, which was pointing the wrong way. I think that was Julian Alwendy, who had been around at turn 1. There's another lapped car in the dirt ahead of them. This is starting to get a little bit shaky now for the two leaders. Darren Butler, I think that is, moving out of the way. But these are, at very least, really, distractions for the leading two. And at worst, they could really end up getting in the way of the top two cars. And that could have a big part to play in the battle. But, yeah, Eric Axelsen, it's funny, Jack, I was thinking exactly the same thing a couple of minutes ago, watching him hunt down Oliver Gibson, just consistently putting in these quick lap times. It does look like the Eric Axelsen of old. And that's enough, I'm sure, to just double the pressure that Oliver Gibson's under right now.
Well, yeah, Eric Axelsen of old also had a downside, though, and it was the fact that he was never very aggressive when trying to get past people, which, yeah, we were saying about earlier about the aggression in endurance racing. He didn't really seem to have it in the sprint race when he joined VRRC. We actually suggested at the time, I remember when he was at Civic Cup, I think it was, when he was constantly basically coming in third, because he could never quite get the cutting edge to overtake and get onto the top step of the podium. We always suggested back then that he was an endurance driver at heart, and now is the test, really, isn't it? He's dropped off by a couple of tenths of a second. He may well get that back on Oliver Gibson. But can he actually take the next step and really force the issue on Oliver Gibson and push forward? Or does he even need to? An hour and 10 minutes left. Maybe we're overreacting to the fact that he hasn't quite got past him yet. Nicky Taylor has ended up coming into the pits, and he has DNF'd, so he has decided to retire. We're not entirely sure why, whether it was frustration or whether there was a hardware issue, maybe he put the wrong setup on the car. We'll try and find that out, but unfortunately Nicky Taylor and Stuart Vickers are both finishing this race in the pits.
Which is a shame. We'd have liked to have seen as many cars running to the flag, but of course, naturally, as the race goes on, some will drop out of contention, and that then results in a little bit less traffic for the leaders to deal with. They're coming up against one of the Lamborghinis now. Mark Stokes, this is, I believe, now to put a lap on. And so that means there will only be 18 cars left on the lead lap. I'm unsure whether some of these drivers have had issues early on or if that's just the pace differential. Not a huge surprise to see more cars going a lap down here, though, really, Jack. It's a shorter lap. It's a very intense lap as well. And it is the kind of track, I think, really, that the more experienced drivers tend to excel at. But that is brilliant driving there from Stokes to get right out of the way, pulled off the racing line, slowed down, obeyed the blue flags, and the lead battle can continue unimpeded.
Yeah, if anybody's wondering at the time difference between the likes of the battle we're watching here, Oliver Gibson and say Darren Butler, who's down in 21st position, there's about 6 seconds a lap being the difference, which is obviously a massive margin. And what Andy said about being the circuit being a lot shorter, the lap time being about 20 seconds less as well, it does mean that you are going to get those lap cars. And I have to say, when you're chasing traffic and you're trying to get around it, out of the top two, whose car would I rather be in? I'd rather be in Oliver Gibson's, because you can try and get past that traffic nice and easy. You can still use your advantage on the straights, whereas Eric Axelson, if they catch up during the middle of some tight chicanes or some tight corners, then all his advantage from a lap has completely gone and been completely negated. It's a lot harder to be in the Lamborghini when chasing traffic than it is in the Oliver Gibson's BMW. So you're right, Andy, that might well come into play. But Jack Smith, I'm having a look at his previous times. Whether or not he's catching the front two is effectively what I'm trying to have a look at. And he was 0.4 of a second quicker than Oliver Gibson on that previous lap. So Jack Smith going quicker than Oliver Gibson. Eric Axelson not making the move yet, but if he hears that statistic and that stat, he's going to have to try and make the move sooner rather than later, or run the risk of being caught by the other Beamer.
Now, I'm going to pose another question here, Jack, that you've absolutely no hope of having an answer for, I realise, but I'm going to pose it anyway. What we don't know is what starting fuel the drivers went for, because, of course, they have open choice. They can fuel the car to do half an hour at the start of the race, or they can fuel it with a full tank, which should, if it's true to life, get them just beyond an hour. Now, the benefit of doing that is that you then spend less time in the pit lane if you do make a pit stop, when you make a pit stop, because you have to put less fuel in. So it is possible that someone like Jack Smith, perhaps playing the long game like he did last week, put more fuel in at the start. He'd be slower then because the car would be heavier, but it might just come back to him as the race goes on. This looks rather lively. Oh, that's a very ambitious and possibly successful manoeuvre by Paul Laramie right round the outside of Lee Piercy at Tosa. What a move!
Yeah, great move. He's giving Lee Piercy something to think about there, maybe even a little bit of a headache, and that's something to do with the livery. That's giving my headache a little bit worse. Paul Laramie, very bright and very brave there as well around the outside. Lovely little battle here for, what is this, 13th place overall? Is it Jones just ahead and Case Willems? It doesn't look like Case Willems' car just ahead. I don't know about that, but they're through Acqua Minerale. They're all very committed, but I think they all followed each other off there a little bit. Looks like they're having some great fun as there's a potential move on here for Piercy. Looking at the inside of Laramie, that would have been even braver and probably more foolish as you've got cars flying around off the circuit.
That was Case Willems and I think Darren Butler. So Darren Butler was a lap behind Willems and they both ended up spinning at the Variante Alta. So it was Butler's Mercedes that this group were catching. So this is now a straight fight for 12th place. John Jones in the red Lamborghini, then the red and green Lamborghini of Paul Laramie and Lee Piercy behind. Laramie's car, very Demon Tweaks, don't you think? Very John Minture and Phil Keane from a number of years ago in the British GT Championship. That with the red and the green certainly catches your attention out on track, and Paul Laramie inching his way up the order now into 13th place. Case Willems, by the way, has pitted, so that is presumably as a result of the contact and the spin that he's just had, but he will, I'm sure, go to the trouble of refueling the car as well, so a pit stop just before 25 minutes into the race. Remember, if they're doing 2 stops, we expect them in roughly every half an hour. If they're doing 1 stop, which I suspect will be the more popular strategy today, I expect them to go pretty much to halfway. Do you think, though, Jack, that anyone will try and stretch it the full hour and then have a shorter fuel stop at the end?
Well, I think that's probably more likely to be what the strategy variation is, in my opinion. I doubt we're going to have anybody come in at half hour. Having said that, we've just had Case Willems come in. Unfortunately, that's for a DNF, though, as well, in the same vein as Nicky Taylor's was earlier on, which is a shame. I'm guessing some kind of damage to the car after having that little bit of an off. But yeah, I think the idea of potentially going as long as possible, maybe even to the hour, then having a quick pit stop right at the end. Well, it won't be very quick because you have to fuel the car, of course, but those fresh tyres right at the end rather than every half hour is probably more likely what we're going to see, because people will want to be slightly ambitious, as well as all three of these drivers very ambitious with the apex suggestions here. Using the track is more of a guideline than an actual rule there.
Very good. Yes, track limits we should mention, by the way, because there was a bit of talk about this a week ago, as Paul Laramie's very late on the brakes into Ravazza 1. If you exceed track limits, you will only get a penalty, if I've understood this right, if you go quicker on that lap than you have on your fastest lap. So you can exceed track limits as long as you're not improving your time. That's basically the rule. I don't think that John Jones improved his time there, but good to see John up in the top 12 and genuinely on pace ahead of Paul Laramie. Lee Piercy just pitted, so that's the first of the stoppers. He presumably is looking at a two-stop race at this point, unless that is another retirement, which we hope it is not. But for the rest of them, they will keep on pounding round as long as they can. The race leaders head down toward Ravazza 1. Eric Axelsson still stuck in the wheel tracks of Oliver Gibson, and this does have the looks, Jack, of one of those battles that could be settled in the pit lane. We mentioned this at Qatar. We said there is a possibility that you could go for an undercut, pit a lap or two earlier before the car ahead of you, get on those fresh tyres for an extra lap or so, and that could leapfrog you ahead. That might really be the only option here for Eric.
Well, yeah, I'm also thinking whether he's playing the 200 IQ, and Rich is probably going to tell me that this is absolute rubbish and a terrible theory, but we're talking about fuel, we're talking about tyres and everything like that. Is there a possibility the reason why he's quite happy where he is, the fact that he's maybe fuel saving? Do you think that's any possibility? Using that slipstream to potentially keep the pace and then fuel save going into some of the corners? Right, there we go. So the only way you can do it is lifting and coating. So that theory has been rubbish somewhat. I thought it was quite a clever thing to say. I
liked you thinking.
Yeah, but obviously, it's completely incorrect, like most things I say. So, yeah, at the moment, Eric is just behind him, probably just growing more and more frustrated by the lap, to be honest.
Yeah, oh, well, hello. It does look like he's trying, doesn't it? In fairness, it looks like he wants to try and find a way through, but just doesn't quite have the pace in the right parts of the circuit. But again, a bit of a missed apex there from Oliver Gibson, and it means that Axelsson's right underneath his rear wing, heading through the Variante Alta. Jack Smith, by the way, only 4.7 seconds behind Axelsson now, so that gap continues to creep down. It's not coming down by a huge amount, but it is coming down just by a couple of tenths or so a lap. We are 15 laps, nearly 16 laps now into this race. We are nearly half an hour into the second round of the World Endurance League, and Eric Axelsson versus Oliver Gibson continues to command our attention. They both flash past the pit lane entry onto another lap. They've got another back marker just up ahead as well. That is Lee Piercy, who has pitted, hasn't he, recently? So he's on fresh tyres. Might not be as easy an overtake as these two would like. And depending on where they catch him, Jack, and how quick he is to get out of the way, could that maybe present the opportunity Axelsson's been hunting for?
Well, again, it'll be easier for Gibson to get past him if they catch them on the straight or something like that. And even if they catch him during the corners, it'll negate Axelsson's advantage more than it will Gibson's over the course of a lap. So again, I'd rather be in the BMW. Actually, scrap that. I'd rather be in this battle, Andy, for 11th place. Andy Carroll, John Jones, and Paul Laramie going so to say. In fact, it's not Andy Carroll, is it? My apologies. It's actually one of the Mercedes that's being lapped. But the two Lamborghinis going hammer and tongs at each other. John Jones and Paul Laramie still haven't let each other go and are still having a good old battle, even if everybody else fell off the road around.
Well, indeed so, but these two have both managed to stay on the road, and as I said, good to see John Jones up there mixing it with Laramie, who was a title contender within class in the Porsche Championship that we ran just before Christmas. Oh, Axelsson, that is where the Lamborghini is so strong through Aqua Minerale, but there's nowhere to go with it. He almost runs straight into the back of Oliver Gibson, got a huge tail slide over the apex curb, and did well to hang on to it. But that sort of thing, Jack, especially in Assetto Corsa, will really aggravate those rear tyres. Axelsson's got to be careful not to get sort of goaded into overdriving, but he's lost a second to Jack Smith in the last lap alone.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it, really? I think that's maybe why we're seeing a slightly more desperate-looking Eric Axelsson, because he knows that the car behind him is chasing him now. Jack will have to get through the traffic, but that could be as easy as you like, or it could hold him up by 2 seconds. We don't know. It's all down to luck. And one thing you can hope for, you can't hope for in racing is luck to go your way, because it very rarely does. Kagashiwa has jumped past a fair few people. I don't know if that's a timing glitch or not. But Johnny Ogden actually is running in the top 5, which is something I wanted to mention before. And Ben Smith still behind him in 6th position. So Ogden, considering he hasn't been in the championship or VRRC very long, Andy, I'd like to give him a shout out, because it didn't really go his way later in the race a week ago, but he's pulling away from Ben Smith, who, if we were to go by last week alone, looked very, very good for a championship fight. But Ogden driving perfectly here.
Indeed so. Ogden is 45 kilos lighter than his teammate, we should point out, not carrying any ballast because he's new to the VRRC. So he doesn't really carry, well, doesn't carry any driver ranking ballast, and he didn't finish within the top 5 last week. So he's not top 5 in the championship, so no championship success ballast either. But yes, I agree. He was quick a week ago. He's quick again this week. He was about 4/10, nearly half a second quicker than Joel Lask, actually, ahead of him on the previous lap. We are into the final hour of this race, and still nose to tail we run at the head of the field. Eric Axelsen surely now starting to exhaust all of his opportunities to overtake out on track. And I think both drivers now will be turning their attention slightly to the pit stops, which, if they do a one-stopper, as we anticipate, should be about 15 minutes or so away. There, meanwhile, is Axelsen's teammate. This is Josh Martin, and he has caught Ben Smith, so this now becomes one of the best battles on the racetrack. It is for 6th position. Smith clearly struggling for pace at the moment, and Josh Martin can see an opportunity to break into the top half dozen.
I was actually interested to have a look at Josh Martin, because of course he'll probably have the same setup as Eric Axelsen, but will the car look the same as Eric Axelsen, and will the body language of the car look the same? It'll depend on the driving style. By the lateness of his braking, that's very, very Josh Martin-esque, isn't it? It's very theatrical, and I always like watching Josh. He's a great entertainer for it. That Lamborghini is so good on the brakes, though, Andy, isn't it? Going into turn 2 and into the last couple of corners, into Aqua Minerale. It's a really good little weapon, and he's going to use it here because the run he's got on Smith is absolutely astronomical, and Josh Martin makes very short work of that one.
Yeah, that was interesting. He did get a good exit from Ravazza. He had the slipstream, but it just looked as though that Lamborghini was perhaps performing slightly better in a straight line. Now, that's not to say that the Lamborghini is better in a straight line because of the BOP. Remember, they do have options for downforce settings and drag settings on the car. You can run that rear wing at a higher or lower number. The higher the number, the more grip you've got, but the more drag and the less top speed. So I wonder whether that's perhaps why Josh Martin's car looks a bit edgier than some of the other Lamborghinis, but was also able to drive straight past the Mercedes. Either way, he's into the top 6 and only 3.8 seconds behind Johnny Ogden, so we'll monitor that gap over the next few laps and see whether or not he is able to bridge the gap. The race leaders, meanwhile, heading down towards Ravazza, the gap growing perhaps in traffic as Chris Blakey heads for the pit lane. Now, Chris Blakey was the first driver within the top 10, I think, Jack, to make a scheduled pit stop, and he's done it just after the half-hour mark.
Yeah, so a couple of people going to follow suit. There is Chris Blakey just coming on the left-hand side, about to bleed into the track ahead of John Jones. In fact, this is potentially going to be lapped by our race leaders. You don't want to be in the way here. Chris Blakey doing exactly what he needs to, and probably a little bit too much, to be honest, driving off the road to try and get out of the way, but at least he didn't try and jump over to the inside of the track in a way of avoidance. A big thank you to everybody who's coming on and liking the stream. You'll probably have noticed that actually your name is flashing up in the middle at the top. So if you want your name to flash up and you want a bit of a shout out, then please do continue to like it. As what we're doing is watching a race we're liking, Andy, here. It's Eric Axelsen with a massive dive up the inside.
What a move from Eric Axelsen. Not aggressive, you say. What a fantastic out-braking maneuver that was. And Eric Axelsen into the lead of the race. Now, Jack Smith is going to try and fight back. Oliver Gibson going to try and fight back. He's up the inside into Piratella. This is dicey. Axelsen tries to hang on round the outside. Inches between the two cars. But the Lamborghini is still ahead. And it's got the inside line into Aqua Minerale. And this is where that Lambo looks really strong. Axelsen to the lead with a phenomenal late braking maneuver into the Tosa hairpin, but now he's in perhaps a world of trouble, Jack, because we're only a few corners away from that really long drag past the pits, and we know that Gibson has an edge in a straight line. This might not be over.
Yeah, I was going to say they both took that chicane as well, a little bit touch and go, and there's traffic ahead of them. This is getting a little bit too dicey, I'm sure, for Rich's standards anyway, because he's going to have to do the shoeing afterwards. But Gibson Oh, look at that. Good driving from the back market to get out of the way just about. My goodness, Gibson is still there. He's within touching distance, and it could be, with the slipstream, a dicey couple of seconds here for Eric Axelsson, but it looks like he's actually got a half-decent exit out of it. He's going to be safe, isn't he? Does Oliver Gibson's thoughts now go towards an undercut?
I think they might have to, because I think Axelsson in clean air should be able to romp away. Gibson might have had a chance at coming back at him there, but he just got a bit too eager on the loud pedal coming out of the final Ravazza, and that got a bit of a tail slide. Axelsson able to pull away, and now look, he's already gone. As soon as you get into a chicane, the Lamborghini gains about half a second on the Beamer, and that is just that change of direction. Being a mid-engine GT3 car. So Eric Axelsson to the lead then, about 35 minutes into the race. There's a Lamborghini in a gravel trap there. That is Kenny Press, I'm afraid, who's been off the road and digs his way back into the race. But Eric Axelsson leads, Oliver Gibson second, and who is that looming ever closer in the background, Jack?
Yeah, 2 seconds gain for Jack Smith as those two at the front decided to fall over each other fighting. And that's massive, isn't it? Because that's about 5 or 6 laps of work that Jack Smith no longer has to worry about. He's going to have a little bit of a think. Oh, there's a big snap of oversteer there from Oliver Gibson as he tries to follow Eric Axelsson's line through at Minerale. Here goes Smith on the back markers, who may have held him up just a touch. And in fact, yeah, Chris Blakey not keen to get out of the way. It is up to the faster car to get past, to be fair, isn't it, Andy? That is a rule that frustrates the drivers who are in the lead, but equally is only fair and is the safest way to do it. But yeah, Jack Smith, that was an awful lot of work done for him just by the fact that Axelsson had to dive him, and Oliver Gibson held him up for as long as possible.
Yeah, what's going to be interesting now, though, is to compare Axelsson's lap times to Jack Smith's lap times, because they're both in clean air now. So let's see what it is across the line then. Eric Axelsson about to break the timing beam at the end of the 21st lap of the race, a 143.39, quicker than Gibson, but actually slower than the pair of them was Jack Smith. Now, yes, he had that little altercation with Chris Blakey, so maybe this lap is going to be a better representation. On that point, by the way, drivers have been told in the drivers' briefing that they need to get out of the way when they're shown the blue flags, but of course, sometimes that's easier said than done. If you're going through a sequence of corners such as Tamburello or Aqua Minerale, you can't just disappear. You can't just drive off the track, really, to get out of the way. There's only so much that they can do, and that's where you can still gain or lose a chunk of time through the lap traffic. But so far, most drivers doing what they should do to try and make life easier for the lead lap cars. So, up towards Piratella we go then. We have 53 minutes still to go. Axelsson is starting to check out now slightly from Oliver Gibson. Jack Smith pushing on behind, though. And Jack, if I'm reading that timing screen correctly, about 0.2 slower than Axelsson in the first sector. So now Axelsson's released into clean air, Jack. He is the fastest man on track.
Yeah, but then Smith is also gaining on Gibson. So although the race lead might be a little bit faster than Smith, second place is well within reach, and especially if Gibson still is squirreling on the rear end like that out of some of the corners, it's very difficult for him at the moment, this period of the race, really. And as I said, you got to be thinking about whether you look at that undercut, whether he comes in on the next couple of laps, if Axelsson stays out, and try and get the fresh tyres on, because whatever he's doing, he seems to be chewing them up, and he's not coming in just yet, but he's trying to get that toe. He's trying to add every little bit of miles an hour to his car as possible. That BMW having more grunts anyway than the Lamborghini, it doesn't seem to bother him right now. It doesn't seem to be an advantage enough for him right now, as Smith is gaining. Looking at that last time, he was half a second quicker than Oliver Gibson, but still a 10th down on Eric Axelsson.
If Oliver Gibson wants to win this race, I think you're onto something. I think he needs to pit now. I think if he comes in now, assuming Axelsson waits until half race distance, that's perhaps 3 or 4 laps that Gibson would have on fresh tyres, with Axelsson still on worn tyres. That would surely be enough to leapfrog Gibson into the lead. And we've just seen how difficult it was for Eric to find a way through. It took him over half an hour to find a way through the first time. And so I think that is really Gibson's only chance. If he does the same thing as Axelsson strategy-wise, quite clearly he's not going to be able to keep up. So I think if he wants to win the race, a pit stop now is a good shout. A pit stop now is exactly what Ben Smith is doing. He is in the pit lane, and might this start a bit of a flurry of activity. I think you've to be good at this style of racing, Jack, you've got to be able to adapt your race strategy on the fly. If Gibson was still in the lead, great, he could stick to plan A strategy-wise, but he's not. He's down to second, he's losing time to the race leader. He's got to try and think of something else that might allow him to get back into the fight.
I haven't done the calculations, so I may again be chatting a theory that is absolutely incorrect. But when he got overtaken, it was 55 minutes to go, or 56, 57 minutes to go. It was close to the hour mark. As soon as he got overtaken, he could have thought about the two-stop. Whether or not that would be an advantage, but he would have had those fresher tyres for longer, and maybe Eric would have had a bit more of a free hit at the strategy, and he could have come in early and not had to worry about it all too much. But then if Eric had gone longer, maybe Oliver would have made up that 40-second, 50-second margin or whatever he would have had to do, because he would have had to fuel less. I don't know really, but Oliver's time to go in early is going closer and closer and closer. Really, this race is going Eric Axelson's way more and more by the lap. Ben Smith was in the pits there, wasn't he? He was currently rotating the track in 5th position. Just trying to find where he is now. There we go. Still inside the top 10. And I'm just going to have a look at his lap times. That's the interesting thing that I'm keeping an eye on Ben Smith for. Obviously, it won't count this time because he's just coming out of the pits. But next time round, we'll see what the difference is.
Well, his best lap is 1.7 seconds slower than the race leader, which sort of said a lot, really, doesn't it? Ben Smith was as quick as anyone last time out at Qatar, and not able to carry that pace again here. There was a car off there. Kei Kogashi was in the pit lane. Josh Martin can't escape from Johnny Ogden either, so these two continuing to do battle for what is now 5th position. Just want to go back to that strategy conversation, though, with regards to Oliver Gibson. I think anybody pitting now is doing a one-stopper. So I do think if you can pit now, you would get a bit of an undercut over a driver who's going to go another lap or so. So that's why I think Gibson really is missing a bit of a trick here. But he may be limited slightly by how much starting fuel he had. If he's fueled a bit lighter than Eric Axelsson, he will have to put more fuel in at the stop, and that would perhaps negate any advantage from an undercut. So many questions, and the great thing is, Jack, we have no way of knowing the answers. We don't have access to this information. We don't know what fuel they've got on board. We don't know what their strategy plan is. We just have to watch it all unfold in front of us. And for now, all 3 of the top 3 drivers, who, by the way, are separated by less than 4 seconds after nearly 45 minutes of racing, staying out on the track.
Yeah, I bet the viewers at home are loving the fact that we've got 2 commentators who really don't know what's going on. But what I can say is, if you look at the comparisons between the best lap and their last lap, there is really no difference. Worn tyres or clean tyres, the difference is negligible. It's a 43.22 was Oliver Gibson's best lap. 43.21 was Oliver Gibson's best lap, and 43.22 was his last lap. And I actually missed that. Looking at the timing screen, Andy, what happened?
Jack Smith nearly threw away his chance of a race win. He was all on the grass coming through the Villeneuve chicane, gathered it together, but that will now lose him time. But on your point, Jack Smith had just done his personal best lap of the race, a 142.993. Now, you're right to an extent, I think, about the tyres, as Craig Curtis dives for the pit lane there from 7th position, releasing Andy Carroll into 7th. Don't count Andy out for a good result, even after that early spin that he had. But I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
I'm guessing you were going to go somewhere about the fuel load, making them slightly quicker.
Read my mind, yes. So the tyres are wearing, but the cars are getting lighter. So that perhaps accounts for a little bit of that. But you're right, the stopwatch doesn't lie, does it? They're going as quickly now as they were at the start of the race. And of course, if you come in for fresh tyres, you're also going to put more fuel in the car, thus making it heavier and thus slowing it down. So perhaps not as much of an effect of an undercut as we thought.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where I was going before Jack Smith gave us something to shout about. Was the fact that he just set his own personal best, and of course there might be a couple of things that are sort of skewing the view of the numbers. But really, that is, as you said, the numbers don't lie. There's no real big time difference now compared to the beginning of the race, and we don't know really if there's any big advantage of coming in, because if I'm looking at Ben Smith's lap time, he hasn't gone particularly quicker now. In fact, he's actually a second and a bit, well, just under a second actually, so about 0.8 of a second slower now than he was on his best lap time. And he's come in for pits and come in for new tyres and everything like that. So I don't think there's really any advantage. So maybe the undercut is not the way to go, because Eric Axelsson can keep going just as quick as he was 20 minutes ago.
I don't know who our tyre suppliers are for this championship. Perhaps we should lobby for them to make some really fast-wearing tyres for the rest of the championship. That might really spice things up, mightn't it? Certainly would introduce a few more pit stops for the races later this season. But hey, I like what we've got. We've got the top 3 drivers separated by less than 5 seconds. We are nearly halfway through this second round of the championship. And, well, based on what happened a week ago, Jack, I am not writing out Jack Smith, because he is getting quicker, and quicker as the race goes on. I wonder whether he maybe had a full tank of fuel on at the start of the race. Could he go to the hour mark and have a really short pit stop? That would be a very Jack Smith way to get himself into the lead of the race, wouldn't it?
It would be, but one thing I will say about Jack Smith and Oliver Gibson and Eric Axelson, actually, is two really trains of thought here. Jack Smith hasn't really gained on Gibson since about 4 or 5 laps ago. And Gibson has actually caught up slightly to Eric Axelson. Now, I'm not saying he's going to catch him. He's not caught up massively. But the drop-off that he was experiencing has somewhat gone away. Maybe Oliver Gibson was just overdriving for that 20, 25-minute period. He's got his head on straight now, and he's actually chasing. It's that age-old saying, shall we say. It's easier to catch than be caught, isn't it? So maybe Gibson has sort of reset himself slightly here, and he's up for the fight as we see Paul Laramie facing the wrong way.
Oh, that's a shame. Laramie was inside the top 10, hasn't yet stopped either, so that's going to take him out of contention for a really good result. But yeah, you make a good point there, Jack, and you'll know this from personal experience, I'm sure. Having spent so much time in the lead of races, it's a lot more difficult to run a consistent pace when you've got someone clambering over your rear bumper, whereas once they get through, sometimes that you can sort of follow in their wheel tracks, you can learn something from them, and yeah, you can just take a bit of a break, really. You're not under as much pressure as the chasing car, are you?
I feel like there was bordering on a dig there, Andy, I have to say.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But yes, to be fair, I only won one race where I led it for more than 3 laps, so I will give you that one. But yeah, you're right. It is very easy to look at someone in front of you, their braking patterns, their turning points and everything like that, and then try and work out how you're faster or how you can potentially edit your line to have an advantage in that corner. Whilst you're still going round, it's fantastic, and you can use that slipstream to just take 2 or 3 laps to figure that out as well, because you're never really going to drop them unless you make a big mistake yourself. Whereas when you're in the lead, admittedly we're not in the wet, but especially if you're in the wet, it's very difficult to figure that out because you're the first person to attack those conditions. And Eric Axelson right now, the biggest thing I always go on about is driving in your mirrors, and I think that's what Oliver Gibson started to do when Axelson honed in on him. He started to drive in his mirrors. He started to look behind him far too often, going into braking zones. Whether Gibson was on the left, Axelson was on the left of him or the right, or driving up the inside. All of a sudden, he's missing his own braking zone. So yeah, maybe we'll see Oliver Gibson start to get his head down and move forward, and maybe we'll see Eric Axelson have the same fate that Gibson did earlier.
Indeed so. Andy Carroll out of the pit lane, by the way, so he's chosen to make a pit stop. Does look, doesn't it, like they're going towards the hour mark here. We've gone past half race distance now, and we've not seen any of the leaders in, so I wonder if they are just trying to stretch this all the way to the end of the full tank, and then they'll dive in. Although, having said that, Joel Lask and Josh Martin both in, so they are 2 of our, not front runners, but people within the top half dozen making a pit stop. Lask, of course, ran as high as 4th in the early stages, and he has chosen to make a pit stop alongside Josh Martin. What's that, about 47 minutes into the race, so we're starting to get a bit more activity. Axelson's car rotating beautifully there through Aqua Minerale, but yeah, interestingly not getting away from Oliver Gibson quite as quickly now as we perhaps assumed that he would, and Axelson heads through the chicane and heads down towards the Ravazzas. So, Axelson looking good rotation on the Lamborghini, Jack.
It does, yeah, and I just heard Rich trying to make some snide comment in my ear, so I'm going to ignore that. There is a good rotation on Eric Axelson's car, yes, and it's a lovely bit of driving that he's got, and it seems to be, he's coming into the pits. There we go, it's a blink first. Oliver Gibson's undercut technique. Yeah. Well, it's not going to happen, is it? Because Axelson is the one who's coming first. The 2 BMWs might come in a lap later, react to Axelson, but there definitely isn't going to be any kind of undercut.
That intrigues me. So there are 2 reasons Axelson would have pitted there. 1, because he felt the tyres were wearing. 2, because he was out of fuel. Now, if he was out of fuel, he's going to have to put quite a lot of fuel in at this pit stop. If Gibson can go another 10 or 11 minutes or so, it could be a significantly faster pit stop for Oliver. And as we've seen, the undercut doesn't gain you a huge amount of lap time, if any at all. So could this still fall back into the lap of the DK Power BMWs? It all hinges really on how much longer they can go. Gibson really now starting to push hard, wriggles the car out of the Tosa hairpin. And he knows that this is make or break now, really. He's got to try and maximise this clean air. There is Axelsen out of the pit lane. Johnny Ogden is going to get past him, but Johnny hasn't yet made a pit stop. That wasn't ideal, though, for Eric, because Johnny has no obligation here to get out of Axelsen's way, and that could just delay the erstwhile race leader enough to give Gibson the advantage.
Yeah, you can tell why F1 teams, they spend so long trying to pit people in at the optimum window, isn't it? It's so you don't have results like that, and Axelsen may well be held up. We'll have to keep an eye on his lap time. He is seen to be getting past Ogden now, and just on the timing screen on the left-hand side, Ogden having fallen down to 4th, and there is Axelsen just about making his way through on the podium positions. Gibson now, will he come in? Will he not? He's going around the final corner. Is he going to stay to the right-hand side? No, and he's going long. He's confident on his strategy.
Again, if he does the same thing as Axelsen, he won't win this race. He's got to do something a little bit differently. And, you know, we kind of saw from Oliver a week ago, he's only really interested in winning races. You know, he's not interested in going out there points racing. I'm sure he'd like to be a championship contender come season's end in December. But right now, he just wants to try and win some races, and he is giving this everything that he has got. Now, his last lap was a 1:43.5. That was only 3.5 tenths off his personal best lap time. Jack Smith behind, similar sort of margin off his best lap time. So they're both pushing hard and they're both lapping pretty quickly. But every lap that they can go now without pitting, they're going to save time in the pit stops. And you know, Jack, out on track, you can gain or lose tenths of a second. But by having less fuel to put in the stops, you can gain seconds at a time. So even if they're dropping 3 or 4 tenths here or there to Axelsen on track, if they can save 4 or 5 seconds in the pit lane, that could be a winning strategy.
The thing is, they're not dropping those tenths of a second either. I mean, Oliver Gibson arguably maybe, but Jack Smith, his last lap was actually faster than what Eric has been able to do for the past 20, 30 minutes or so. So it's astonishing how quickly Jack Smith has been able to close in. It's like he's turned the wick up. He was 3 seconds behind before Axelsen made the pit stop. It's now under 2 in a lap and a half or 2 laps. Jack Smith has just turned on. It was like he was toying with his little brother, and he just decided, okay, I want to win now, so I'm gonna beat you.
Well, and biding his time. He knew what his strategy was going to be, Jack Smith. Perhaps he always knew he was going to go long. Needed to look after the tyres, therefore, in the early stages. Needed to account for the extra weight at the start of the race too. But as soon as he saw Axelsen pit, he realised, right, time to go. Got to try and close in on Gibson and make sure that he is the one challenging Axelsen. That was a slightly dodgy moment for Johnny Ogden. He rejoins the circuit. John Jones, was that he rejoins alongside? Yes, it was, who is a lap behind him. A close call as the Mercedes rejoined the circuit. So Ogden has rejoined in 7th, 5.2 seconds behind Ben Smith. Ben Smith has pitted. Now, of course, Ben Smith pitted 12 minutes earlier than his teammate, according to my spreadsheet. So that is the effect of an undercut there, actually, Jack, interestingly, because they were the other way round with about 5 seconds between them, I seem to recall, before the stops.
I know, it makes me sort of think that Ogden's had an issue somewhere else, because we've just been discussing how the undercut shouldn't be that powerful. That doesn't mean it isn't that powerful, but it sort of shouldn't be, and you know, it's interesting to see. Axelsen's still in 3rd place, and considering he came out just ahead of Ogden now down in 7th place, they've got Lask, Martin, Smith between them. It does make me think that there has been a moment for the 7th place driver.
You could be right there, I suspect. We will have to wait and see, but Ogden 5.7 seconds behind Ben Smith. Place gained for Smith. He's 3.8 seconds behind Josh Martin. Josh Martin has pitted as well. He pitted about 8 minutes after Ben Smith did, so perhaps on slightly fresher tyres than the Mercedes driver. 2 seconds separate the 2 BMWs then at the head of the field. 36.5 minutes to go. I think if you've stayed out this long, Jack, you're going as long as the fuel tank will allow you. And like I said, in real world GT3 racing, that is about 60 or 65 minutes. So if that is what they're going to do, there could potentially be another 10 minutes. That is potentially another 5 laps that they could do, and 5 laps less worth of fuel that they have to put on board at the stops. Lap time wise, Gibson does a 43.4. It's a 43.7 for Smith. Axelsen on the last lap though did a 43.5, and he's just gone purple in the middle sector. So Eric Axelsen, he knows what he's got to do here, Jack. He's got the fresh tyres. He has to use them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was just about to point out that Gibson and Smith are the only 2 drivers to have not pitted yet. So they're potentially the only 2 drivers that are really deciding to go this long. The last person to pit was Johnny Ogden, actually, which might be why he's dropped back. So he hasn't had a moment. He just decided to pit, actually, as soon as he got caught with Eric Axelsson. But you're right, he needs to do something. What's his lap time? A 1 minute 42.8. At one point, I was about to point out that Jack Smith was the only driver to delve into the 42s. Eric Axelsson makes that 2 drivers, and he's got a 10th quicker.
Yeah, fastest lap of the race for the Swedish assassin. So 42.8 was about 6/10, almost exactly 6/10 quicker than the race leader. But as I said, it looks as though Gibson and Smith's pit stop will be several seconds, perhaps, quicker than Axelsson. So Axelsson needs more laps like that to try and negate the advantage that the Beamers could have. They got some traffic on the horizon. Might that tempt them into the pit lane a little bit earlier? We'll have to wait and see. Through Ravatsa 1 goes Oliver Gibson, who's put together a really impressive race, really. He's led most of the race. Axelsson was only ahead for a short amount of time, really. Leader stays out, but Jack Smith heads for the pit lane. That is interesting, Jack. Jack Smith, despite being behind his teammate there in second place, he has decided to come in first. And this will be our first little guide as to how these 2 strategies for the Lamborghini driver and the BMWs is going to play out.
I wonder if that's Jack Smith going slightly rogue. I wonder if the options were sort of put out to both of them, and they decided to share a strategy. And maybe Jack Smith decided last minute to go another way. It's just a bit of inter-team drama that I'm just trying to sort of stir about, nothing really. But it is going to be cool to see where Jack Smith pops out, whether he can get out and put the new tyres on, put the times in, just like Eric Axelsson seems to be doing. Although it did take Eric Axelsson about 2 or 3 laps to get up to this kind of speed. He's coming round coming across the circuit now. Start finish.
It's going to be close.
Slightly early. It's going to be very close, Andy.
Yeah, but Axelsson's going to have the momentum, isn't he? So Axelsson stays ahead. So it wasn't enough for Jack Smith. And I reckon by the time he gets up to speed, he'll be a similar distance back from Eric that he was before Eric pitted, I reckon. Yeah, that's up to 3 seconds or so already. He's on slightly cold tyres, so it'll take him a moment or 2 to get up to speed. So Jack Smith, maybe he gained half a second out of all of that, but by the time they both get up to speed, I think it's going to balance out pretty equally. But now we've got to try and slot Oliver Gibson into this. He is 43.7 seconds ahead of Eric Axelsson. This is going to be tight.
Yeah, well, Jack Smith was about 3.5, 4 seconds behind Eric Axelsson when Axelsson pitted. So now Gibson could have gained a bit of an advantage. But I doubt it's going to be enough, and we're going to find out in about 45 seconds' time. There was a gap of about 43 seconds between himself and the provisional race leader. Gibson coming in. Rich doesn't think it's going to be enough in my ears, Andy. I don't know about you, but I think Axelsson's going to take this.
This could come down to how long it takes to change tyres, because I think the fuel will probably take less time than the tyres, or very similar anyway. They can change tyres and refuel at the same time, unlike some real-world GT3 championships, and so that speeds things up ever so slightly. Axelsson barreling down towards Ravatsa 1. He is 3.1 seconds clear of Jack Smith, but he is really has all eyes now for Oliver Gibson. Gibson sat stationary in the pit lane. Is he on the move? Yes, he is, and I think he might just be able to do this. He is running at pit lane speed limit, remember. Axelsson at full speed. This is going to be very, very close indeed. The Lamborghini's got the momentum, but the BMW is almost at the pit lane exit now. I don't think it's quite going to be enough for Gibson, but this is going to be close. Gibson certainly has gained from that, Jack.
He has, but is it going to be enough to actually launch some kind of reply? I don't think so, because as we've just been saying, it'll take a lap or 2 for Gibson to get those tyres properly up to temperature and in the zone again. Eric Axelsson to perfection. Really, the strategy didn't really matter left, right, or down the middle, really, did it? You could just pit early, you could pit on the halfway line, or towards the end. It doesn't seem to have mattered for anybody. I don't think there's been any major gains in terms of strategy from anybody down the grid, Andy.
Well, let's wait and see then. Axelsson pitted 8 minutes before Oliver Gibson, so that was probably 4 laps or so. That means that Gibson's tyres are 4 laps fresher. Is that going to be enough to give him a little bit of a pace advantage to be able to close in on the Lamborghini? Jack Smith put in a purple third sector on the previous lap, so his car is running quickly. This may yet boil down to Axelsson versus Smith. After all, we know that Jack Smith probably has a bit more pace in the locker, and he looks like the quickest maybe of these 3 right now, Jack.
Yeah, he's just dipped underneath 3 seconds to Eric Axelsson, which is which is key and crucial, because I don't think if Smith pulls up to Gibson, I don't think Gibson's going to put up as much of a fight as he did earlier on against Axelsen. I think you'll find her teammates probably swap and try and use Jack Smith's pace to pull Gibson along and really go for the fight to Eric, like 2 versus 1 situation, which could cause a bit of a headache to him. But Axelsen's not pulling away on that lap, is he? The gap was about 1.5 seconds. Gibson's only going to get slightly quicker from here on in.
Let's see what the lap times are then. Axelsen breaks the timing, being 43.3. Obviously, Gibson's lap is slow, and 0.3 quicker than the race leader is Jack Smith, so he is on it. And you're right, his chances of winning this race could now hinge on how much of a defence his teammate Oliver Gibson puts up if and when Jack Smith catches him. Gibson, though, significantly quicker than Axelsen through the Tamburello chicane that time. Was that a mistake from Axelsen, or was that the slightly fresher tyres on the BMW starting to benefit him? He's quick through Villeneuve as well. That BMW is quicker than the race leader right now. And we wait for...
Yes, I apologize. I'm blowing my nose. I'm really sorry. It's a very exciting part of the race, and my voice is really taking over from my nose. It's a bit annoying, really, but the BMW does look rapid, and to be honest, the BMW in the hands of both drivers look quicker than that Lamborghini right now. So this could all boil down to a 10-minute sprint or 20-minute sprint, which is, let's be honest, what half of our viewers want in the first place.
Well, yes, quite. I suppose you make a good point. Half an hour to go, 29 minutes to go. Look at this, top 3, 2.3 seconds between first and third place. No safety cars either in this race. This has been a straight-up race. We've been going for over an hour now. And look at it, top 3 cars in the same shot, dropping down into the Ravazzas. They have got a car to put a lap on in a moment or two. That's Darren Butler, who I think is, yes, just heading out of Ravazza 2. So they're going to have some back markers in the near future. But after that, there is Butler, in fact. After that, it's clear sailing. Oliver Gibson, not particularly quick through the Ravazzas there. And look, he's now less than a second ahead of his teammate Jack Smith, who can sense a real opportunity here to claim a second victory in as many weeks.
Yeah, and it wouldn't put it past him either. It's going to be fascinating stuff to see if he can keep this pace up. Within a second now of Oliver Gibson, who's just about within a second of Eric Axelsen as well. Everywhere we saw that Lamborghini be stronger earlier in the race, Andy, is everywhere it looks slightly weaker now, isn't it? This BMW is absolutely chasing them down. And you're right, I think we could end up having Butler. Oh, no, well, he's jumped out of the way rather courteously. Let's say that he's decided to go to the kitty litter and jump out the way. But this is heating up now. We can't wait for this one. The dynamics. Does Gibson sniff a race win and go for it himself? Does he let Smith through and try the hard work for him? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. And I'm sure Elaine in the YouTube chat is hiding behind the sofa right now.
I don't know about Elaine. I think I'm getting close to joining her, to be honest. This is nerve-wracking stuff. Axelsen's gone to pieces. I don't know what's going on. He was all over the place through Villeneuve, missed the apex at Tosa, and Oliver Gibson's only half a second off the race lead. The top 3 cars are now covered by less than 1.5 seconds. Gibson definitely still in the hunt here as they head towards the Variante Alta. Now remember, that BMW performs well down the main straight. If Gibson can get a good run off the final corner, he's got a really good shot at attacking down towards turn number 1, and that is where Axelsen will have to make that the widest Lamborghini Huracan on the planet. Down into the Ratzers, this is the key part of the circuit. Defensive line there taken maybe by Axelsen, certainly an earlier turn-in and apex, and that might just hurt him on the exit. The gap is 5 tenths, let's call that. Axelsen weaving to try and break the toe, but look, the gap now starts to creep down as we accelerate back past the pits once more.
Yeah, I'm sure Elaine will love to have you behind the sofa, Andy, as well. Just as much as they're loving seeing Oliver Gibson and Jack Smith chasing down Eric Axelsen here. It's pulling up to the back of him like we haven't seen before in this any kind of endurance, in inverted commas, races we've done before with the 45-minute race. It looks like Gibson is fully on it. All thoughts about how his mid-race performance out the window. He's got a, sort of that reset, that soft reset, and he's off and running again. He's looking absolutely rapid and loving it. Josh Martin up to 5th is a driver that we haven't really spoken about that much, but a good drive from him, better than his qualifying position. Ogden up in 7th place, had that consistent run. Chris Blakey outside the top 10, but Craig Curtis just inside it. Andy Carroll as well in 9th place. Plenty of stories up and down the field. It's a bit of a shame we've lost the likes of Kenny Press and Piercy and Stokes, Wilhelms, Taylor and Vickers, There's been quite a lot of casualties in this one, Andy, but I suppose that is endurance racing. People are going to have to retire with spins and damage and everything like that. It's just part and parcel of it.
I don't think I could have handled Nikki Taylor a part of this lead battle as well. It's exciting enough as it is without inserting the always exciting Nikki into the lead group. Josh Martin, by the way, you mentioned there, he's fractionally quicker than Joel Lask ahead of him. Only 1.8 seconds between them as they accelerate out of TOSA. There they go. But we should probably flick back to the leaders because they're about to accelerate past the pits once more. And Oliver Gibson looking to try and hunt down Eric Axelsen. But Jack Smith is as close now to Gibson as Gibson is to the race leader. And Oliver just can't get off that final corner as well as Axelsen or, in fairness, Smith behind him either. That's Gibson's weakness, and it's the one place where he needs to excel, Jack, in order to be able to use the advantage of the BMW down the straights.
Yeah, he's really struggling, isn't he, with it? And Smith, though, doesn't seem to be having that problem. He's the one who's actually gaining down the straights on both of them, and they're closing up within 25 minutes of the checkered flag, and the race leaders are within a second of each other. We thought qualifying was close. The race, the checkered flag is going to be even closer. The podium is stacking up to be brilliant. And everyone who said that the BMWs are a little bit overpowered in this race, well, the Lamborghini is leading it and has led it for quite some time. Doesn't look like he's going to lose it right now either, because, you know, on track is where you want to be in the race lead. Where is the lead? Where's the closest Mercedes? In fourth place, Joel Lask. So, yeah, all three cars represented in the top four. Joel Lask has dropped off to the tune of 42 seconds, though. And it's a massive margin.
Well, these three are just in a league of their own, aren't they, really? I mean, I don't necessarily think that's that Mercedes is off the pace, because we've seen Mercedes putting in quick individual laps in qualifying and indeed during the race. It's just that these three have been on another planet, really. And, you know, that's the way it goes sometimes. You know, some drivers excel at certain tracks. Some cars do have a slight advantage. You'll never have a complete level playing field. But what we do have is a fascinating battle for the race victory. Just under 24 minutes of racing to go. Can Oliver Gibson get this final corner right and unlock the door to the race lead? That looked a little bit better maybe than it has been previously. He's half a tenth or so closer than on previous laps. Is the slipstream going to do enough to get him in striking range? He's gaining fractionally as they come past the pit lane. A purple final sector for Gibson, a purple middle sector for Axelsen, but Gibson with a 42.659. Jack sets the new fastest lap of the race.
Yeah, he's rapid, isn't he, at the moment? Jack Smith was the one who dropped off. This is Gibson's opportunity this lap, really, before Smith pulls up to the back of him and gives him another heading. Look at that, Axelsen's feeling the pressure because he's trying to break the toe, Andy. That's the sign of someone who's feeling the pressure, who's driving in their mirrors slightly. It's going to slow him up, but he's going defensive already with 23 minutes to go.
If I'm Oliver Gibson, though, that gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. That means that I'm in Axelsen's head. He's worried about me. He thinks that I'm quicker. He's desperate to try and break that toe. And that desperation tells Oliver Gibson that he perhaps has the advantage. He's getting away now from his teammate Jack Smith as well. So Oliver Gibson, all of a sudden, is the man of the moment. This is by far the lightest of these three cars, remember. That won't just help overall one lap pace, but it should also make the car a little bit lighter on its tyres over a race run. And of course, this is still a relatively long run to the flag. They pitted with still, you know, over half an hour to go, all three of these. So it's a relatively long run to the flag. You've got to be able to look after the tyres. That is Adam Lyle off the road, by the way, in the distinctively liveried purple Mercedes at the Variante Alta. But Oliver Gibson just 3/10 adrift. Surely he's not going to try and have a go going into Ravazza. Better to try and get off these corners well, but he is certainly closer now, Jack, than he has been for the last few laps.
Surely all his focus needs to be on this corner in particular, coming out of the Ravazza. I don't think he's messed it up quite as bad as he has before. And I think, if anything, he's pulling on the Lamborghini now. This is his opportunity, Andy. We could see a change for the race lead as Oliver Gibson tries to retake his position from earlier in the race.
The closer you are to the car ahead, the more powerful the slipstream is, but I don't think he's quite close enough. Weaves to the inside, more to try and distract Axelsen, I think, than anything else. But Eric is not an easily distracted man. He holds on to the lead, and actually it seemed to put Gibson off his stride more. Again, Eric drifts over to the middle of the road, just trying to break that slipstream. Don't know if there's any rules about weaving down the straights to break the toe here at the VRRC. I don't think he's doing anything terribly wrong. It will be frustrating, Gibson, for sure. You can move once and then move back to the racing line, so I don't think Axelson's doing anything against the rules, but Oliver Gibson will certainly be wishing that he just stays still. Just give me that slipstream. Give me every mile an hour that I can have down the straights, because that's where I'm going to have my best chance to attack. But Axelson so far has an answer to every question being posed of him.
Yeah, Axelson's almost turned up the wick himself, and he's had that 42.8, another personal fastest lap on that previous time round. So all three of the top drivers have been in the 42s, but Jack Smith is the fastest out of all of them. In fact, no, he isn't. Sorry, Oliver Gibson, 42.65. Right, that's 200ths of a second quicker, or 300ths of a second quicker, really, than Jack Smith. So it is very, very equal between those drivers. They're all in the 42s as they keep going round towards the end of this race. The fuel has been burnt off. The tyres aren't dropping off anywhere near as much. It all comes down to the skill and the bottle of the drivers for the next 20 minutes. With the back markers in play, just having a look, they've got Craig Curtis, they've got Kagashiwa, and a few of the drivers as well. Johnny Ogden potentially in the middle, Andy Carroll. So there's a fair few drivers to be getting past that they're catching up to.
Indeed so. Down towards Tamburello we go again. Still Axelson stays out of striking range, really hammering the curbs. That car's handling the curbs perfectly fine, isn't it, really, through certainly that part of the circuit. You've got a great view of it there. Virtually no instability caused whatsoever by the line that Eric was taking. His teammate, by the way, Josh Martin, continuing to chase after Joel Last. That gap is down to 1.3 seconds, and Josh actually is on course for his personal best lap of the race on this lap. He's just done 2 personal best sectors, so we'll keep an eye on that gap. But this could be a flashpoint within the race, because this is Paul Laramie and John Jones. They're dicing over 13th place. They're not really watching their mirrors and worrying about the race leaders coming up, but I can tell you the race leaders are very worried about them.
Yeah, it's sort of a headache, isn't it, when you see 2 drivers are actually fighting for position. You really don't want them to have to fight for that position, as Josh Martin has got past Joel Last without us even seeing it. It was about a second gap, I think you said, about 20 seconds ago, Andy, and now the gap is 4/10 the other way. A bit of a strange one. Must have seen a mistake from Joel Last coming out of the final couple of corners.
Joel was a couple of seconds slower than Josh Martin in the final sector, so yeah, I don't think Josh had caught him, so if there was a mistake, I don't think Josh had any part to play in that, other than he was applying the pressure to Joel, and Joel ultimately succumbed to it. Right, down into Ravats as we go. We've cleared the 2 lapped Lamborghinis. Well, Axelson and Gibson have. Jack Smith not getting the rub of the green, really, is he? He's stuck between those 2 Lambos and losing more time to the leaders. So, you know, there were some who perhaps thought that Jack Smith had just been pacing himself in this race. If he had pace, Jack, he would be showing it now, wouldn't he? And he can't keep up with the top 2.
No, he is getting that slipstream, but the amount of time he's lost in the battle to fight through the back markers has really hurt him here. He has got a good amount of time still left to catch up to the top 2. And let's not forget what happened when Gibson and Axelson last went to battle with each other. Jack Smith gained about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
If that's the case, yeah, within 3 or 4 corners, Smith could be in the race lead battle and not even have to try. So he's really hoping that Gibson can do him a favour here and reignite that earlier battle.
Yeah, twice now, really. His chances have laid solely in the hands of his teammates. Meanwhile, Joel Last's been off again. Joel must have an issue here, because Ben Smith's gone past him, and Johnny Ogden is trying to follow him through, and off into the gravel he goes again. That car doesn't look like it wants to slow down into the big braking zones. Joel Last, when did Joel pit? Just after halfway, so he's not on a particularly long stint here, so I'm not quite sure why he's suddenly so far off the pace, but that means that Ben Smith gets into the top 5, his teammate Johnny Ogden goes 6th, and Joel Last down to 7th, but he is at least 25.5 seconds clear of Kei Kagashiwa, should be able to stay there. Now, Eric Axelson, purple first sector, purple second sector, that means fastest of anybody. That gap right now, Jack, is an enormous 0.8 of a second.
Yeah, if anything, it's the biggest gap we've seen since Axelson pitted. Pretty much Axelson pitted, actually, isn't it? Because when they came back out, when the 2 BMWs came back out, it was a lot closer than it is now. Axelson, is that Lyle that he's going past there, using a little bit of a slipstream? That'll help him enormously. Gibson now gets behind him as well, trying to pick up those extra couple of miles an hour. Will he get there in time to make the move. He's going to be offline. That's not going to help Gibson in the slightest.
And no, and nor will the fact that Axelson's just done a new fastest lap of the race, a 1:42.541, half a second quicker than his pursuer, and the gap suddenly up to 1.4 seconds. Jack, you came out with a line at the start of the race. I think you mentioned it last week as well, that endurance racing is not necessarily about driving at 100% the whole time, but 95% of your true pace 100% of the time. Well, right now, they're all driving at 100%, and I think it's just that Axelson is capable of doing that more consistently than Oliver Gibson or Jack Smith behind him. This looks pretty entertaining, doesn't it? This is Johnny Ogden back ahead of his teammate Ben Smith now, so Ogden back into the top 5, and Joel Lask is still a part of this all-AMG scrap for 5th place.
Yeah, the battle here is actually, this is what we were expecting for the top 3 at this point in the race, weren't they? But they sort of gapped each other to over a second now. It is actually the same as what we saw earlier, but Lask has got a decent run here on Smith. Ben Smith, of course. Smith going for that defensive line, trying to force Lask around the outside. Lask is going to do it late on the brakes. That's a nice move, Andy.
That was one of the moves of the race. There have been several candidates for that, really, haven't they? Axelson's move for the lead earlier on, definitely a candidate for move of the race. And Rich Hayden's read my mind and intercepted my segue beautifully. Driver of the round is something else that we have to try and have a think about here, Jack. I've no idea where to start. Let's get this battle dealt with first. That was almost Ben Smith into the back of Joel Lask. Eventually, Joel stays in front. Ben's on the grass and drops back, but so many candidates for driver of the round tonight, Jack.
Yeah, well, some of the strong candidates are obviously in that top 3. Axelson and Gibson, I'd say, are my vote slightly higher than Jack Smith, but Ogden, I think, has had some really good consistent running, had nice battles with his teammate Ben Smith. Joel Lask has struggled with a few too many mistakes, a bit of a shame for him. Andy Carroll's not been quite the driver he was last week, so I don't think he's quite in the conversation at the moment in time, but I have to say, I'm very impressed with Ogden with the consistency, and Josh Martin from improving from his qualifying position as well, and just generally improving from last week, as Lask shows that he's struggling even more with those tyres. It is worth pointing out that Lask is on one of the slightly longer strategies than anybody else out there. He's been out there for about 16 laps, and having said that, actually, I've seen quite a lot of drivers that are well over 20, so I can't even give him that excuse.
Well, Ben Smith actually pitted 8 minutes before Lask, so he's on a longer stint than Joel Lask. Oh, admittedly, he's behind Lask, but he was asking him all sorts of questions there, wasn't he, as they went through the Variante Alta. I think as far as driver of the round is concerned, I mean, we still got just under 14 minutes to go, but the best driver in this race has been Eric Axelson. And I know that it's not the done thing to give driver of the round to the person who wins the race. They're already claiming enough of a prize as it is. But the move he made for the lead was sensational. And the battle that he then had with Gibson, he's played the strategy well. He's responded beautifully to the pressure that was applied to him for a good 20 minutes there by the 2 BMWs. Axelson, touch wood, has not put a foot wrong all race. He's taken the fight to the Beamers when he's had to. He's not just led the way and sort of paced himself for the full 90 minutes. He's got to be in that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think, and he's just done another 42.5. He's only 100 slower than he was previously, setting another purple sector 2. There are different ways you can win a race. You can win a race by just somewhat getting slightly lucky with the strategy, which I'm not saying is entirely what happened to Jack Smith last week, but there's a reason why we didn't vote him driver of the round with the win that he had. Whereas Eric, for every reason you just said, Andy, has won, is winning, not won, this race by sheer grit, determination, and driving skill. As Lask shows somewhat of the opposite there and goes very wide onto the AstroTurf, and we could see another Smith, Ben Smith, coming around and potentially being on the inside for the Ravats. Last of the late breakers. Smith's going to have that line, and there we go, done and dusted for 6th place for the time being. And to be honest, Andy, just going back to Eric Axelson and singing his praises, I forgot about his race lead move as well. It was sensational, but let's get back to this battle.
This is the World Endurance League, not the World Rallycross League, everybody. Spend more time on the tarmac than the grass, please. Both Ben Smith and Joel Lask doing more grass tracking off the final corner. And that means that Lask is alongside. He's looking to the outside line into Tamburello. He's done this already. He's trying to chop across the nose of Ben Smith. Oh, and there maybe was a slight touch on the apex. Smith is sideways, and Smith is the one recovering from the gravel. Jack, that's such a difficult one to call. It's rare, isn't it, really, that the car on the inside ends up being the one getting sideways, but if it's deemed there that Joel Lask turned into Ben Smith, I think that Joel may have a case to argue.
Yeah, well, did Joel Lask turn into him, or did Joel Lask have the corner? That's something we don't really know. Looking at the angle and no replays or anything like that, so the stewards are going to have to potentially have a look at that one. But it's a shame to lose such a great battle towards the sharp end of this race. That's all we can really say about it. It looked like both drivers had a bit of a run into the corner. It's a difficult one. Ben Smith, luckily, I don't think has lost any more places. He is 4 seconds behind Joel Lask, but he hasn't lost a place to Kai Kokoshiwa, so he's still in 7th place. And really, the argument might be to switch them around and come the end of the race, or it might not need it. It could just be deemed as a racing incident. Because those things do exist, Andy, even though some drivers forget about that sometimes.
You mean there isn't always someone to be blamed? We shouldn't immediately be angry at someone when there's a collision on track?
No, it's true. It's a myth. I've heard people call it a myth, but actually it's true.
Well, it's news to me, that, Jack, but I'll take your word for it. Yes, good old racing incident. I am absolutely an advocate for that. You've got to let them race at the end of the day. That looked like a bit of a moment for a back marker, actually, just in front of Eric Axelsen, who's suddenly losing time up the hill. I don't think there was contact, but I think Eric had to just jump on the brakes there to avoid whoever that Mercedes was getting sideways. So that lead gap suddenly comes down to 0.8 of a second as Oliver Gibson again takes the rally cross line there, getting fully airborne over the curb through the Variante Alta. Meanwhile, this is Sam Milner. Sam Milner, 12th place. Haven't mentioned him much in this race, Jack. He's fending off Paul Laramie, who had that spin. I think he had a spin anyway a little bit earlier on. 0.6 between them. May only be for 12th position, but there are points up for grabs. And at this stage of the race, you just want to finish as far up the order as you can. And I'm sure that definitely applies to these two.
Yeah, and the orange BMW there doing its best Ginetta impression and going the full hog by having the bonnet coming off as well, by the looks of it. He's obviously had some kind of issue, some kind of damage at the front end there. So he's decided to carry on. He's going to score decent points, whether it's 12th or 13th. Doesn't really matter for Sam Milner. He's there, he's scoring the points and trying to be consistent. And it looks like Paul Laramie trying to go around the outside. We've seen a couple of drivers do this, and Paul Laramie is the latest to make it work for the time being. He did go very hot, but I think he's managed to do it.
Blimey, okay, that was impressive. I tell you what, that BMW wasn't very quick in a straight line. I know it's got that damage, which I'm sure had a lot to do with it, but Paul Laramie still had to do a lot of that work under braking, and yeah, full bravery, only just made the corner. But he made it, and he's made 12th place his own and should now be able to pull away from Sam Milner. Sadly, Paul is the best part of a minute now behind Chris Blakey, who is over a minute adrift of Craig Curtis. So those positions unlikely to change. Could you say the same about the podium places? Well, quite possibly, because Eric Axelsen, having lost that time a lap ago at this part of the racetrack, is now starting to streak back away from Oliver Gibson. Perhaps now, Jack, the conversation is more over who will stand on the second step of the podium, because that gap between the DK Power BMWs is definitely shrinking.
It is, but it sort of shrank quite a lot, and then all of a sudden it grew quite a lot as well to over a second, and now it's back to a second. I can't really say that any of these drivers look like they're going to fall away and lose the positions that they've worked so hard for so far. It's been a real spectacle of endurance driving, hasn't it? And the endurance race as a whole, because we've had people, different strategies. We've had strong people at the start. We had qualifying pace that was sort of semi-representative. And another fastest lap, did I hear a gasp there? And it was Eric Axelsen. You can't stop them out at the moment.
I mean, Oliver Gibson just did a 42.6. That would normally be the fastest lap of the race, but it was a 1/10.5 slower, 2/10 actually slower nearly than Eric Axelsen. That is an incredible lap from Eric. Again, I know the fuel load is wearing off now, so the cars are getting lighter, and of course he's definitely pushing harder. But that is a sensational lap time, a 1:42.44. Pole position, bear in mind, was a 42.2. So we're within a couple of tenths now of a qualifying time, and that was on fresh tyres and low fuel. If that doesn't tell you how hard Axelsen's pushing, I don't know what will. But actually, Oliver Gibson, in fairness, responding by going a 10th quicker in Sector 1, and that is the fastest he's been through the first part of the lap so far.
Yeah, the biggest advantage that Eric has normally is in that Sector 2, isn't it? Because that's where he can really get the car under load. That's where he seems the most planted, gets out the corners well. The BMW looks a little bit heavy with the lateral movement. And obviously the BMW is a little bit quicker in a straight line. There's not so much of that through Sector 2. Let's have a look at the difference in tyres. There's only about 0.03 of a second between Eric Axelsen and Oliver Gibson in favour of Eric Axelsen. But Gibson was a 10th quicker in Sector 1, so it is coming. This lap is coming the way of Oliver Gibson. It's a constant yo-yo effect that we've got going on at the moment, isn't it? But it's only by about 1 or 2 tenths that the gap shrinks or grows at any one time.
But every tenth that Gibson gains, he's putting more pressure onto the race leader, who's now 6.5 minutes away from potentially claiming victory in the second round of the World Endurance League. And don't forget, Eric was 5th in Qatar, so this is a good start to his season, although he'd rather not have Jack Smith on the podium. We're riding on board with Axelsen now, then heading through Tamburello. Jack, what are you seeing?
Yeah, it's lovely. Oh, a little bit of a snap. I was about to say it's lovely and smooth, and he's not hit either of the curbs. But he did hit the curb on the right-hand side a little bit too hard. I don't think it's hurting too much. He has lost about 1/10 of a second. Late on the brakes. Again, nice and smooth. Keeping it over to that left-hand side. It's so easy to go too fast through there. Not worried about it at all. You can see a lovely, smooth one turn at any one time. And the steering angle is at maximum right on the apex. It's everything you want to see. And with the slightly worn tyres, Andy, it's so hard on exit not to spin the rears up or not to understeer going in. Again, he's within an inch of that apex. He's almost perfectly off the Astro, but again, he's just slightly screwed that one up. Into Acqua Minerale. This is where he's really been top dollar this evening. And there we go. Look at that. It's so smooth again. There's no dramatics, no worries whatsoever. He's pulled another 10th of a second back at Oliver Gibson as he's trying to chase down Andy Carroll. Look how late on the brakes he can be. He's all over that curb on the right-hand side, misses it slightly on the left. That means he doesn't get bumped out onto that AstroTurf, and we've seen time and time again, Joel Lask, Oliver Gibson, they hit that curb too hard on the left, and they're too far out wide on the Astro. And again, nice and deep into the Ravazzas. Get it nice and composed. Don't grass cut too much on the right-hand side. Don't get on the Astro. Boom, to a T. Lovely lap from Eric Axelsen.
I tell you what, Jack, there's a reason I'm a commentator and you were a racing driver, because you, on several occasions there, described that lap as smooth. To me, it looked anything but. There was more opposite lock than there was whatever the opposite of opposite lock is going through a corner. He was all over the place, bouncing off the curbs. Well, it was quick, but it did not look safe to me. I'm much happier watching this from the external view than I was on board with Eric Axelsen. But he's got a second over Oliver Gibson, who's got absolutely buried up behind Andy Carroll. Nothing Carroll did wrong there. He just couldn't get out of the way. He had to go through the chicane there at Tamburello. And now, again, the same situation really through Villeneuve is going to perhaps hamper Jack Smith. But that, with 4 minutes to go, Jack, has likely handed this to Axelsen. The question now is what order the BMWs will finish in.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's worth noting, you said it did look, at places it did look slightly scrappy from Eric Axelsen, but it's nowhere near scrappy, just because it's so hard to only snatch the wheel 2 or 3 times during a lap is so ridiculously difficult. Normally, say, myself, if I was driving that Lamborghini, I'd be snatching the wheel 3 or 4 times going into every single corner, not just 3 or 4 times over the course of the lap. So trust me, that was a nice looking lap from Eric. Probably not his best, but still very nice indeed. Right, Smith versus Gibson is the topic you just brought up there, Andy. You're right, it is starting to come down, but only by maybe 1/10 or so. Axelsen has pulled 8/10 of a second just while we were pretty much on board with him. Both of those BMWs squirreling on the exit. I don't think there's going to be too much unless Gibson feels very sympathetic and wants to really be a good teammate for Smith and let him pass to pick up some extra points. I don't see that as necessary for second and third at the second round of a championship. So I'm hoping that Gibson and Smith go right to the end, trying to fight for every position.
Which I suspect they will, to be honest. I don't think they'll fight tooth and nail, but I think that Gibson certainly isn't going to move out of the way. Why should he? Far too early in the championship for those sort of antics. Just had Darren Butler in the gravel trap there at the Ravazzas. He's dropped 4 laps down now, sadly, with that moment. But good to see him still going. That's definitely the spirit of endurance racing. Things haven't gone to plan for Darren, but with every lap he's out there, he's learning, he's getting quicker, and he's got, of course, a couple of months now to prepare himself for the next 2 rounds of the championship. We've got 17 cars running. We've got 8 of them on the lead lap. So Kei Kogashiwa would be the next car to go a lap down, and Kogashiwa, I think, yes, he is the next car up the road from these 3. That will probably be the last back marker that they have to negotiate. So Kei, as long as he's watching behind him, shouldn't make life too difficult for the race leaders, who are, Jack, halfway round their penultimate lap of what has been a thrilling race.
Yeah, for anybody who's wondering what endurance racing sort of is like, this has been almost, you mentioned it earlier, Andy, a bit of a sprint to the end if you were comparing to something like a Blancpain race or a WEC race or anything like that. But this is why you watch those 24 hours of Le Mans or 24 hours of Spa or anything like that, and in the Nürburgring, is because ultimately it comes down to nearly always the lead, or there is some important battle being within a couple of seconds for the last half hour or so. It's astonishing, isn't it, how it works out? But it is fantastic to watch. It's exhilarating. And like I said, it's not just 20 minutes worth of action spread out over 3.5 hours or 90 minutes. It is 3.5 hour races, all sort of back to back to back. It's been brilliant. Some big congratulations to the drivers out there who have gone around, given us the entertainment, and put on a fantastic show. We are on to the last lap now. Eric Axelsen looks like he's got this one sewn up. He's lost half a second, but to be honest, he could lose another half a second and not really be too much bother.
Indeed so, and Jack Smith didn't have a great run there through the end of the previous lap, so he's dropped back away slightly from Oliver Gibson, so less than a lap to go, and well, top three cars still covered by only a fraction over 2 seconds, and that's what makes this so impressive. If this was a 20-minute sprint race, you'd expect that to be the sort of running order at the end, but these three, they're a minute clear of anybody else, and yet these three themselves virtually inseparable, really. This has been a masterclass in endurance racing from all three of them, but particularly from this man, Eric Axelsen, who turns his way through Piratella, drops down towards Aqua Minerale with a 1.5 seconds in hand over the DK Power BMWs, and surely now on course for a race victory. The question really is whether Jack Smith has an answer for his teammate Oliver Gibson. He's realistically got one chance to try and overtake, and that is into the first of the Ravazzas, and that would be, Jack, a very risky manoeuvre to make on the final lap against your teammate.
Yeah, and I think although Gibson was a little bit loose through the second apex there, he is losing time to Smith. I don't think he's going to be close enough, is there? There's not going to be any major moves unless he really goes for a big dive bomb, which should be a little bit dangerous, I'd say. But Eric Axelsen has been absolutely sublime. Qualified on pole position. We questioned on whether or not he had the pace in him to do it lap after lap. He not only had the pace, Andy, he also had the guile to retake the race lead when he needed to. It's been absolutely sensational. And here at Imola, in the second round of the World Endurance League, Eric Axelsen takes the checkered flag to take the top step of the podium, with Oliver Gibson in second place, leading his teammate Jack Smith, race winner a week ago, comes in third here at Imola.
Less than 2 seconds separate the podium finishers after 90 minutes of full-bore racing. That was fantastic stuff, and Eric Axelsen will be a delighted race winner. And actually, two teams are going to lock out the top 4 positions, because it's Axelsen's teammate, Josh Martin, albeit over a minute off the lead, who nearly throws it away on the last lap, but just gathers it together coming out of the Variante Alta. He is on course for a 4th place finish. Not bad work at all for Josh Martin, whose Qatar race did not go to plan. I think it's worth saying 19th place was his eventual finishing position. Much more like it here at Imola, and Jack Smith comes out of the second Ravazza and will accelerate to the finish line to claim the checkered flag well inside the top 5. A nice performance that was from Josh, who started 8th, so 4 places gained over the course of the race. Johnny Ogden started in 6th, only gained 1 place, but that doesn't really tell the full story of what was a bit of a yo-yo race for Johnny, but he's 21 seconds up the road from Joel Lask, with whom he was battling intently not that long ago. Lask, Ben Smith, Kogashiwa, Andy Carroll, and Craig Curtis will complete the top 10. At the end of a fantastic second round of the World Endurance League. We'll be back with all of the post-race interviews with our podium finishers in just a couple of moments' time. Well, round two of the World Endurance League had it all, really, didn't it? Fast, frenetic action throughout the 90 minutes, a absolutely magnificent three-way battle for the victory that went right into the final moments, and I, for one, can't wait to get the thoughts of our podium finishers after what was a grueling second round of the championship. We're going to start the post-race interviews appropriately enough, with our race winner, the second time that we've spoken to him tonight, Eric Axelson. Congratulations. Started on pole position, set the fastest lap, won the race. Pretty easy evening's work, that wasn't it, Eric?
Yeah, yeah, kind of easy. No, not really. Had a terrible start. The car was bogging down, and yeah, I got passed by Ollie and I think it was Nikki. Yeah, so the start wasn't there, but yeah, the rest went pretty well.
Well, yes, let's try and get into the rest because that's where all of the action was, really. We've just heard yourself and Oliver off air chatting about the move that you made to get the lead. You obviously had some good pace in the early part of the race. You caught Oliver, and then you were behind him for quite a lot of time. What were you learning during those laps that ultimately led you to make what was a fantastic overtake?
Well, what was I learning? That that like the BM is pretty fast in a straight line. I think that was the main thing I learned, and that so the parts where I'm faster on the track is the parts there's almost like impossible to overtake. So yeah, I just kind of had to like wait for Ollie to make a mistake, and yeah, I don't know if he was braking like a bit early there or whatever it was, but like for a hundred of a second, I thought maybe I should try it on the inside, and I did, and yeah, I made it stick.
It was a fantastic move. It caught us off guard. Actually, we weren't really expecting it. I don't think Oliver was either. We'll get his thoughts on that in a moment or two. I want to talk to you though, Eric, about the pit stop strategy. Everyone pretty much went for the one stop, which we kind of expected, but that still left options, didn't it, for different times at which you could pit. You, interestingly, despite having the race lead, a track position advantage, you came in before the two BMWs. Was that always the plan? And when you pitted, were you at all worried that maybe that wasn't the right plan?
My plan was probably to stay out as long as possible, to stay out as long as I felt I had the pace, and they were, and I think I made the right decision because like because I lost like a couple maybe three tenths there on the last two laps I did on the first stint. And then I pitted, and then after I went out, I think Ollie and Jack kept doing really fast laps. So I think I made the right decision. But then it took a few laps for me to get up pace again. So yeah, the second stint was it was really tough. It was fun.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed watching it. The pressure you must have been under there was pretty unimaginable for that reason and plenty of others, actually. The move that you made, playing the strategy right, the defensive driving at the end, we've all decided unanimously that as well as winning the race, you are also going to be claiming the Driver of the Round award for this round. We don't often give it to race winners, but we just felt that that was such a flawless performance from you under pressure that you deserve that award as well. So you're taking all of the prizes tonight, Eric. Well done.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. I just want to say a huge thanks to Josh because he spent like a lot of time on the setup that made me win. So thanks, Josh.
There we go. That's interesting. Yeah, nicely done, Eric. Right, we will hear from Eric, I'm sure, again at some point. But for now, Jack, chance to catch up with the man who very, very nearly managed to get the better of him.
Yeah, Oliver Gibson, big congratulations on second place. Just how sweaty are you right now?
Oh, geez. I had a fan on as well, so I don't know what's happened there. But yeah, no, I just want to say congrats to Eric because that was a brilliant race, and I'm a bit jealous of his move. I think I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, no, very sweaty, very sweaty.
What were you expecting from it? Because obviously you'd spent quite a long time with him right in your rearview mirrors. You didn't look like you were going for those defensive manoeuvres too much. Were you quite content with where he was on the circuit? Obviously, you just said he didn't expect it. What were you expecting? I suppose. When did you think he was going to make the move?
I thought he was gonna have a nice little drive about, but no. Um, yeah, no. I saw he did Nicky at that corner as well, so I thought if there's anywhere it's probably going to be there. I just I saw him move to the inside, and then I was like I moved a little bit, and then he went obviously back to the outside and then back to the inside, and I was just like whoa. But he did loads of like looks and that sort of like I don't know if it was on purpose, like mind games or something. But I was just like, maybe he's not going to go for this move, and then there you go, straight down. And I tried fighting back, but there's no chance around the outside of things Aqua Minerale, something like that.
Yeah, it is, and me and Andy quite often call that like a psychological race move to keep showing people the inside and then the outside, and then obviously they leave a door open and through he goes. A bit of a shame. After that, though, I'm sort of copying Andy's question here. The strategy. What was your original strategy, and did that change because he got through?
My strategy was, well, for if I started about 10th, I think, after Qatar, I wasn't expecting much. But yeah, I saw Eric pit, and then I thought I could pit now, but I thought the tyres played a factor in Qatar, and I thought it might play one here. So I stayed out, and then I thought fresh tyres and low fuel means obviously I'm going to go faster, but clearly not fast enough.
Well, you did go fast. It has to be said. For any normal day, your pace would have been absolutely ballistic. But it just so happened that you had Eric Axelsson putting in some astonishing times ahead of you, which is a bit of a shame. You did pull up to him quite substantially. With about 25 to 20 minutes to go, you guys were separated by a second. Were you thinking a little bit about Jack behind you at any point?
I mean, yeah, I think I always do when I see Jack behind me. But I was focused on Eric, and then every time we crossed the line, because we were so close, I could check while I was still on the straight what times everyone was doing. So I saw Jack getting closer and closer, and I thought I need to make this move. And then Eric started pulling away, and I was just like, oh, I'll settle down and try and just get my head focused and put some laps in.
Well, you certainly did a great job entertaining us, Oliver. A fantastic race and a big congratulations for second place. It was well deserved and hard fought. So congratulations, and we'll speak to you next week.
Thank you very much.
Well, fascinating stuff there from Oliver Gibson. And we heard him reference his teammate there, Jack Smith, who was not far behind him for much of the second half of the race. But Jack, that was a bit of a slow burner from you, wasn't it? The first half of the race, actually, a bit like Qatar, you weren't necessarily one of the fastest cars on track, but you seem to have a habit of getting there when it matters.
Yeah, I kind of had a Josh Martin-esque start to my race, to be honest. I had technical issues in quali, had some weird like stuttering, which is not ideal, so I had to sort of fix that. And then going into the race, obviously I had a bad start again. I need to work on my starts. They're terrible. I'm quite used to have a BMW that has a good launch, but I need to sort that out. But yeah, and then following Joel, yeah, I just had to wait for him to make a mistake because he was like a brick wall trying to get past him. And then obviously by the time I did pass him, they were down the road, so I had some work to do. I had to get the oars out and start rowing. And then yeah, towards the start of qualifying, I had 25 kg extra ballast than what I practiced with, so that threw a spanner in the works. It gave me a lot less front end, which I had to sort of deal with during the race. So I think my times were about 4 tenths off a lap, which is not ideal, but I managed to pull it all the way back, and I got really close towards the end, but I just didn't have the pace. But the guys in front did amazingly well. They were so quick during towards the end, so yeah, really good.
I want to go back to that battle that you had with Joel in the early stages, actually, because we saw one moment where you tried the outside into turn one and it didn't work, and you ended up losing a lot of time. In a sprint racing championship, a touring car championship, you'd sort of feel, you know, sometimes maybe you don't have to go for those moves, just sort of bank the points. But in a 90-minute race, less than 20 minutes into a 90-minute race, is there a bit more of a feeling like, no, I've got to get past this guy now, otherwise that's it, my chance to win has gone, and it's a long race from there, isn't it?
Yeah, I knew I had the pace over Joel, but I knew that if I kept waiting and kept waiting and kept waiting. It'd just be, I think it ate about a second a lap, just staying behind him. So I had to sort of do something, and then I obviously tried the outside, but he must have hit a curb or something and went into me. So, yeah, that's just one of those things, isn't it? But yeah, I just had to follow him, see where else he was a bit weaker, and I found the last corner exit was a good one. So got the launch, made sure I had the inside for T1, and then I made the move stick. So that was my thought process there. And yeah, just trying to get through traffic was a nightmare as well, but we did it in the end, so not too bad.
All things considered, then, a good start to the championship. We've now got this slightly bizarre situation, or certainly unique to us here at the VRRC, where you now have to sort of sit on this for 8-9 weeks and plan what you're going to do next, really. You're second in the championship, looking at the early championship standings. Eric scored maximum points tonight, so he's moved ahead of you. What's the plan between now and round 3? I presume we're going to see you out in the minis, and that naturally will take a little bit of your attention away from this, but there's practice that has to be done, isn't there?
Yeah, unfortunately, minis I won't be taking part. I've got a few bits I need to be doing at uni and stuff like that. So I'm doing this one purely because of the gaps in between. It fits quite well, but yeah, unfortunately not the minis. But yeah, I guess I'll be pulling out the old MATLAB script for the strategy for next race. But yeah, it's gonna be weird having a long gap like that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And yeah, I quite like these formats. So yeah, I just hope I can have a better start to the next one.
Absolutely. Well done, Jack. Congratulations on the podium. And well, we'll see you in 8 weeks, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Andy.
So there we go then. Always great to hear from our podium finishers, and so much to ask them at the end of these 90-minute races with all that has happened in the second round of the World Endurance League. Now, the third round, as we've just been saying, you have to wait quite a long time, 10th of April for round 3, but worth the wait, because from one iconic racetrack, we head to perhaps an even more iconic racetrack in the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. We're not racing for 24 hours, but we will have another 90-minute extravaganza from Spa on the 10th of April. And I believe, if I read the calendar right earlier on, we've then got a week off for whatever reason before round 4, which is perfect because I'm just about to book a holiday from the 15th to the 22nd of April, so that's worked pretty much perfectly. I don't usually plan my holidays around the VRRC schedule, I must stress that, Rich, but hey, it's worked out well. Very much looking forward to being back for that one. Right, that, I think, is it. Jack, your final thoughts on what was an entertaining evening?
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? I can't believe how the top 3 were so close. I think less than 2 seconds right at the checkered flag, which was pretty astonishing. The race start was also very impressive, mainly thanks to Nicky Taylor making it 3 wide into turn 2. It had everything we wanted, some intrigue with the strategy, feisty fights, great race moves as well. Yeah, everything about it was pretty top draw. Can't wait for Spa. And I also can't wait for the minis, of course, the Mini JCW Cup coming up only in a couple of weeks' time. I think that's going to be, that is where everybody's appetite, hopefully, and they'll keep coming back for VRRC action.
Indeed, as will we, Jack. A pleasure always. Thank you very much for soldiering on through your pretty serious illness by the sounds of it. We will have you back fighting fit, I'm sure, for the start of the Mini Championship. Big thanks to Rich as well for all of his hard work behind the scenes. That is it from us. We hope you've enjoyed these opening 2 rounds of the World Endurance League. We'll be back with more on the 10th of April, but we hope to see you for our Mini Championship in the meantime. For now, though, from everyone here at the VRRC, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
Woo!